All righty, good afternoon, guys. Thank you all for bearing with me for a bit. We were experiencing a little bit of some technical difficulties, but everything's good to go here right now. So after long ado, I had to go ahead and get our guests' books before we did an interview, just so I could be knowledgeable. Of course, it's Mr. Larry Chambers, his book, Death in the A Shau Valley, and his book, Recondo, which is absolutely outstanding, and I've actually reread them since the first time getting ready for this. And I'm going to link those as well as his YouTube and website into the show notes to where y'all can follow along with what he's doing, because some of his YouTube channels has some very interesting stories, and his website has a lot of stuff that he's going on. As you can tell in the background, he's got his paintings up and such. So I will read here a little bit just to give you a little bit, although all of y'all know about Mr. Larry. He spent 15 months in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne as a Lurp/Ranger. Other awards and decorations Chambers earned: 2 Bronze Stars for Valor, a Purple Heart, 2 Air Medals for Valor, a CIB, the Army Commendation Medal, the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry. He was with L Company 75th Infantry Ranger and F Company 58th Lurp in Vietnam. And of course, we'll get into after he ended up earning a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Utah, and was in the Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society. So outstanding man in the military and out of, as you can see from that little intro. But guys, go ahead and start getting y'all's questions in, and we're going to get it started today. Mr. Larry, hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, doing great. But you didn't mention my jump wings. Those were one of my more important.
I did leave those off. That's another interesting mark along the way that we'll get into. But reading your book, I'd remembered first watching Jack Murphy's interview, The Team House, and talking about growing up. And well, first off, before I get that, where and when were you born? Actually, is where we start.
Well, I was very young and don't remember being born, but Santa Paula, California, in 1947. My dad was military. In World War II in Korea, and I was kind of in those early years raised on Fort Berry, which was a guided missile base overlooking San Francisco. So my future was sort of laid out by my past.
And was your father was an Alamo Scout, wasn't he?
Well, I'm not sure. He never taught. Those guys in World War II usually were. I talk about everything. He never, talk about anything. But he had the CIB with the star on it, and he was wounded in Leyte. And I found a picture, just listening to conversations with my mother and stuff about him. You would think he had dropped the atomic bomb, but who knows if it's true or not. But anyway, he was, if you were in Leyte, that was a heck of a battle, for the Army. So
I can the guys in the Pacific, both Army, Marines, and then the Navy, I just can't imagine what it was like going up against the Japanese like that. I mean,
back then too, I remember my dad with, he had stripes going up and down on his arms, and the CIB and all that stuff. And he was first sergeant of this missile base. And I just remember all these, my friends were privates and corporals, but all these guys had tremendous respect for the guys that were in World War II. And I remember there was one guy had a 101st Airborne patch on, and that he gave me one. And the guy had jumped, into Normandy with 101st. And so it's kind of, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but a lot of guys weren't really excited about, when they got to Vietnam, and they'd call our names off, and they called up the guys that were in the 101st. When they said my name, I jumped up, went, yay! This guy's a little crazy. It was like my childhood dream, believe it or not, was to be in the airport.
Wow. That I can only imagine the looks. There you are actually yelling and happy when they yell off 101st. That's I can only imagine what that sight must have looked like with some of the guys looking at you. Did when growing up, were you a big sports guy? Did you
Yeah.
were you athletic growing up?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I got through school. They didn't call it dyslexia back then. Nobody knew what that was, and there was no such thing as ADD, but I had them all. And so I was actually had to, cheat through grammar school to get to high school, and then high school got easier. But I'd have to. It set me up for the Lurps because I'd learned how to look sideways, by looking down on the test. Because you'd put a time test in front of me, and I would like go blank. I froze. So I was kind of at the back of the class, and the only way I could, the only thing I could do was I was on football, basketball, track, all that stuff, boxed. And so sometimes my schedule had 2 PE classes and everything. I actually got kicked out of my high school English class by my English teacher, who later became a good friend of mine. And he kicked me out for talking, ADD. I can't stop talking. And these 2 girls were the ones that were talking. And he said something about them. I said, why don't you blame somebody? And so he goes, okay, you're out of here. And so years later, when this book, Recondo, came out, and I had another investment book that came out, I sent it to him, and I sent him the little clippings, it was on the Book of the Month Club and blah, best, all that kind of stuff. So he sent me back his novel that he retired and wrote his opus, and he sent me his clippings, and it said, the 100 worst books ever written. And so, we just laughed about that because I was the worst kid in the class, and yet I ended up being a writer, which is
crazy.
It's crazy, yeah. But that being ADD in the classroom, I was at the back of the class. But in Vietnam, as a point man, I moved into the head of the class because when you're hyper sensitive to everything, you hear a snap in the bush and like you're on it, and you almost become what I want to say, your instincts are heightened, and that's
hypersensitive. Yeah,
I'm sure it's from that. So I found a lot of guys I'd start finding out, because nobody ever claimed that they had dyslexia or ADD back then, because there was something wrong with you. You would be crazy. But later, I made friends with my football coaches and stuff, and I found out they were dyslexia, all kinds of stuff. That's why they went into sports. That's where we went,
Wow.
School was boring, but the only thing that was fun was football and, basketball and track.
Which would end up coming in boxing would end up coming later on, helping you out quite a bit with the line of work you were about to be entering.
It also got me in trouble because I actually thought I was good, until I, like in jump school, you go back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I found out you could get out of some of the running during the day if you volunteered for the smoker. They had this smoker. So I went in there and I thought, hey, I had golden gloves from my high school. I'm like, can do it. So I was waiting in my line, and the 2 guys ahead of me, there was one guy that was real golden gloves from like, the like Florida or someplace like that.
State, yeah.
Oh, he got in there, and this guy walked in, thought he was going to be Muhammad Ali, and this guy went boom, 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 and the guy was under. And I just went like, I got to get back to that running sound. I just kind of snuck out the back door, realizing not quite as good as in my mind.
That'll put it in perspective real quick. One of those old salty guys really.
They had 25 fights, and they were only like 17 or 19 or something like that. Oh my God.
Jeez Louise. And one of the interesting guys, there's a lot of stuff going on in between here that I'm not going to ruin completely for everybody, but you ended up you were wanting to actually want to be a pilot, were you not?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, from the time I was a little kid. Everybody used to play, you know, cowboys and Indians, and I played shooting Japs and Nazis. That was my friends, what we did. We even practiced getting shot on our bikes and would, you know, get shot and, you know, in the street, and the MPs would drive by and go, "You guys get out of the street," you know. So I was practicing for the Nazis. And I, because my dad had been in World War II, I got an appointment to go to West Point, to Air Force Academy. So I'm all excited, take the test. My mom, I kept reading the same question over and over. Mm-hmm. And I think I got one of the lowest scores that had ever, no, I don't, it was pretty low, but they, you know, sorry, you can't go. And it was the same thing. I took the test for the Marine Corps. I took the test for the OCS, but anytime I found out later, after years of therapy, that what happened was when I perceived something that was super important in my mind, I went into flight or fight. And in your brain, the amygdala, the fight or flight part of your brain, there's no memory in there. So that's why kids, when they sit down and they're going to take the test to get into a college, and they're just, you know, like it's a big deal, and they go blank.
Just stuck on.
There's no memory in the fight or flight part. It's just get the hell out of there, or, you know, fight.
Wow.
So anyway, make a long story short, that didn't happen, but.
Well, I was about to say it worked out. Really, it seems like
I got smarter later. It's kind of really funny, but I, you know, for years thought I was like a dumb shit, and then later on, after about 25 books or so, and people going like, "How do you do that?" I have no idea, but I took a cognitive test, and I scored off the board in things that are not tested in the uniform tests, that the ACT tests and all those tests were. You know, these, and some of these, like there was one set of questions that didn't even have the questions in it. There was just a series of I can't remember, pictures, and then you put it together or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I scored 100. I scored off this 100%. Wow. So my cognitive, my what would you call it? Like instinctive, your
aptitude
natural intelligence was really, really high. So then that really helped me in writing books, because, you know, I'd copied so much when I was in grammar school and high school, you know, I could just copy what writers did. I found out, well, this isn't that hard. They're just doing, oh, you put this chapter here and the introduction goes there, summary.
That's great. I mean, and to be fair, even without being dyslexic or whatever, I mean, when I went to take my ACT, I actually took it, I think, probably twice, because the first time I froze up. I mean, it's some people can't take tests both with learning issues, and some people normally just can't take tests. I'm one of those people as well. I cannot do it.
I call it the hunter brain. We have the hunter brain, and that's the brain that is primitive. And, you know, you go back, you know, a million years, we were all hunters. I mean, you go back 30,000 years, we were hunters and foragers. And then like the last ice age, which was like 30,000 years ago, all those guys that couldn't keep up with us, they were called farmers. They weren't called farmers then, but, you know, they were sitting in the back eating horse hoofs and stuff like that. Well, suddenly the earth gets warm, and they could grow plants, and they could stay in one place, and they didn't have to go hunting. So suddenly the farmers, and you could trace it from the guys that stayed in place, got married, you know, they built cities, they built countries, they stayed in one place. They were the ones that were successful, and they hired the hunters to guard. They were the soldiers. So you can almost see the tracing back in history. I spent a lot of time looking at things like who was the guy that broke the sound barrier, and he didn't get us selected for the astronaut program. What was his name? I'll think of it in a second. But he couldn't pass the officer's test, so he was a sergeant, and yet he learned everything about the planes, and he actually became, you know, the best test pilot in the world. And he was, gosh, I'll think of his name in a minute. It'll like pop in my brain. But he had the hunter brain, and you can go back and prove this stuff. And what happened was at the end of World War II, there was a psychologist named Gibson, and he did a study. Not the end of World War II. It was the beginning of World War II. We were going up against. Think about this. We hadn't been in a war for 20 years. We had biplanes and shit like that, and we're going up against the Nazis, the Luftwaffe, and then the Zeros. They were like the best fighter pilots in the world. So this guy went to the flight school and did
Chuck Yeager.
Yeah, Chuck Yeager was the guy.
Yeah, there we go.
I put him aside, Chuck Yeager, because he was at the same time period. This guy found out that they were washing out the guys that were the best fighter pilots. The reason was they couldn't pass the IQ test to be an officer.
Jeez.
I mean, and then if you look at and you overlay Chuck Yeager's years, it was right when that happened. He couldn't make an officer's program, but he was so good, he actually ended up an officer, but I'm sure he didn't take the OCS test. He was just a natural pilot. He had that natural hunter's brain, which, there's all kinds of stories about him. Like I heard one time there was a civilian plane in distress, and they didn't know how to get something. And he said, well, look, if you go down, look at that button on the right, down below, that goes to your, your engine, da-da-da-da. And he walked them through it. But that's the way this guy was, with this brilliant mind, which is never, was in the normal course of the, Harvard and all those type of people. That doesn't ever, you're not going to find us in their Hall of Fame,
Poor boy from West Virginia.
Yeah, poor boy from West Virginia that was, the best, actually the best, pilot in World War II. Mm-hmm. And I guess he had World War II and then also, I guess, Korea too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Definitely Korea too, because I was just looking and he was testing after Korea with a lot of the black. I think the black guys was in there.
Those guys were my heroes. I just grew up like admiring people like that. Where
how could you not? Yeah,
Gene Autry and stuff like that. I'm going to go for Chuck Yeager.
Yeah, the right stuff. One of the things that interested me, because we've had a few guys that were drafted, but I didn't know that you were actually drafted.
I volunteered to be drafted.
So
what happened was, and this comes back to my grades, I actually almost couldn't read with comprehension until I was in junior college, till I was about 17 or so. And so I started getting really good grades, but in my second year, I dropped down from like 15 units to 12. Well, that triggered a draft notice. But the only way I could get the good grades was I couldn't take that many classes.
Courses.
But this is when I realized I was a good negotiator. I went down to my draft board and said, look, I'll volunteer. They hadn't sent me a draft notice. They just made me A1 or 1A. I went down and said, look, I'll volunteer for the draft if I can play one more thing of football, because I had one more semester, and I played football at Shasta College. But it was great because as soon as football season was over and I got my degree and I went in the Army, and basic training was like,
man, you were ready to go.
School Scout camp. It was easy,
Gosh. And see, I didn't know, I'd forgotten or either didn't even know you played football and went right in like that. And I can see why you were in peak physical shape, which comes in to a great deal of a great story later on. But I thought it's funny, and I don't know if you've told this, and I just we're jumping ahead, but we're going to speak about another man that really sets a standard for you. But did you have a buddy that you went in on the buddy system with that kind of got parted ways? Yeah,
George Ellis. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What?
I talked him into go. He went with, he's going to go with me, and then we get down to the end where I'm getting ready to go on the bus to go to advanced infantry training, and he gets on the bus to go to lifeguard and bus training or bus school, and I went like, what? He goes, well, they asked me what I was good at. He was the worst driver in the history of our high school, but he wrote down he was really, his expertise was driving big rigs and tractors. So he didn't go to Vietnam. It was like, you interviewed another guy just recently, Ed Mann.
Oh, yes, 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 Mr. Ed.
Here's what I found. Well, that's how we got together. I found, so we're talking about, he played football at Shasta. I played football at Shasta, and I got to looking at the team pictures. I'm standing next to him in 1968. But I thought I went to the Army in 68, but you still played football, 67, 68. And I didn't realize that we were on the same team.
That is crazy.
I know. It's how you start looking at these connections later in life, and it's like, oh my gosh, especially when they're in black and white, like boom.
I'll have to, when I send this to him, I'll have to mention and bring that up, because I don't think he mentioned he mentioned playing football, but he did not mention you were on his team.
Well,
and I
wasn't as good as I was. That's why he doesn't mention it.
Oh, okay, there you go. A little
I know he's going to hear this, so I had to throw that in there. No, I was really good on defense, and he was on offense, so we didn't talk to each other.
Oh yeah,
But he is actually, he is responsible for helping me really. He's actually helping me with my writing, and I didn't think anybody would help me with that, but he really goes deep into, well, what did that feel like? What did that mean to you? And I go, I don't know. I didn't feel anything, and so he's kind of forced me to dig in deeper and find out because I'm writing another book, which we can talk about later, but
yes,
writing one on my journey, back to Vietnam and Cambodia. Mm-hmm. And he goes, oh, okay, you need to go line by line. Line by line, so he's been really instrumental in helping me and up in my game.
He did a great book. Bear with me, it's right here. I can grab it. So I didn't tear down my guitar sitting here, but his book, Jungle Ghost, that we just had him on. He great book, by the way, guys. And I can see why he would be such a good help, because he really gets into the minutia of, like you just said, what were you feeling? I mean, the way he describes the triple canopy while he's walking point is, I mean, it makes you feel like you're in Vietnam walking point with him.
Yeah, no, he is really good. Really good. I hate to say he's better than I am, but he really is.
I was very glad you hooked us up and managed to get us in touch with him. That was great.
His book cover is how I figured out we're on the same football team, because that picture of him is the same year the picture on on our team, on our team photo. And I'm going, oh my God, you're standing next to me. He couldn't believe it. I called him up, he come over, he goes, that's you. He goes, oh my God.
Wow. I'm gonna have to see that photo at some point in time.
Oh God, I'll show it to you at the end of the thing if you want to see it, but it's really funny.
That is great. So you're in, and you've gone infantry. You mentioned going to AIT, and then jump school is your next big thing, and you immediately, I think, start. I can't pronounce his name, but the guy that makes a big hit on you, his former SF, I think he's the CEO, Captain Boudewijn van Pamelen.
Yeah, he was. I think he was Malaysian or something, but yeah, he really had a big impression on me. It was like, guy was squared away. But that was AIT. He was in AIT.
Oh, okay.
And a letter caught up with me when I was literally in Vietnam. A letter caught up with me that he'd recommended me to go to. They had shake and bake school, to be a sergeant. And he put me in it. But I'm glad I did, because I'd rather have made sergeant the hard way than the shake bake. We call them shake and bakes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. And how did you like? We always have guys talking about, jump school is a lot of fun. The Black Cats. Did you have any trouble? Did you enjoy jump school?
Did you enjoy it? Nobody enjoys jump school. It's like you run from the time you get up in the morning. When you go, the only time you don't run is when you're eating, and they only give you like 15 minutes or something. And as soon as you walked out of the mess hall, there was a pull-up bar, and you had to do like 10 pull-ups or whatever it was, and then start running. And you had to run wherever you went. You ran. That's why I went to that fight thing, boxing thing, just to try to get out of it. But it was cool. It was also, I discovered something when I jumped out of a plane. I'd be scared shitless on the flight going up. And of course, because I was afraid, I usually would end up in the first stick, which meant I was in the door. So I'd be standing in the door and, you know, and looking at the ground, you know, 1,200 feet below, whatever it was. But as soon as I went out the door, suddenly everything was good. That's the hunter brain. My brain would click in, and it was like wonderful. You know, I knew what to do. I, you know, was, you know, having fun going down. And I found out because after Vietnam, or after, you know, when I was in Utah, I started jumping, you know, skydiving, you know.
Oh yeah, private skydiving club.
And I would go out on the strut of a plane and just hold it and just look around going, this is fantastic, you know, and then just let go and drift down. So I know why guys just love it, you know, if they've got that, because their brain comes alive, you know, the adrenaline and the dopamine is flooding in your mind. So
I can see why a lot of you high speed guys, and I see a lot of the SF guys that were in heavy combat during the GWAT have taken up a big love of skydiving, Halo, and all of that. Like you said, it's a good way, safe way, in parentheses, to get their adrenaline flowing again, to where they don't have to do something dangerous or unnecessary, shall we say.
It's a safe way to put yourself in danger. I mean,
the safest way, shall we say.
There's nothing safe, but you know.
Oh man!
But that also helped because you'll read reading about the SF guys in SOG and the other Lurps and guys that were appointment. I had people say, "Well, were you afraid?" No, you know, just the clarity. I could see everything. I mean, it was like time slowed down, like they said. You know, you'll hear people talk about. But I would just, you know, bullets would go by and go, "Oh, there goes one right there." You know, not quite like that, but you know, just totally in the moment.
I mean, it's amazing. And Mr. Ed, it mentions the same way of how he wanted to get away from, and totally different units. Y'all are, you know, 4, 6, up to 12 heavy. Him even wanted to get far away, even at point further away than normal, because of how loud and how he could pick up on just if a bush had been moved from someone running, he was able to spot in on it. It's amazing y'all skills y'all honed. So
you put 60 to 100 guys in a infantry unit out in the jungle, you can hear them clear to Hanoi.
Oh gosh,
he wanted to get away from all that for protection. The further out in front, the safer he was. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron, but I felt the same way, you know.
Absolutely. And one of that sayings or statements will come up later, but I think that kind of already when you got into Vietnam, when you were when the LRRP, I believe it was Sergeant McDougal, I believe, came around looking for guys. He was talking about behind enemy lines, giving it the real gung-ho talk. But I believe the statement that stuck with you is, we never leave anyone behind.
No, that's not what stuck with me.
It wasn't?
No,
okay.
What he said, I mean, we did say that, but what he told us was, look, you guys are all 11 Bravo, so you're going to go to an infantry unit. And you know, I knew what that was going to be like. He goes, you know, that's why I said that you can hear him clear up in Hanoi, hear him coming. He says, we're, you know, 5, 6 guys in the LRRP unit. They don't know where we are. They know where the infantry guys are. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Would you rather be out in the front where nobody knows where you are, in the back and the rear where they know where you are? And I'm like, hand went up, you know, and everybody thought I was crazy, but it made logical sense.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially hearing all of that, and it sounds again like it would be counterintuitive to go into a special unit, but
it's counterintuitive.
Not at all.
That stuff is self-selection. You know, self-selection to go in paratrooper, self-selection to go in the LRRP, self-selection to go in SOG, self-selection, you know, to go in the special forces. It's Rangers. It's all, you select your way on up. As to how much dopamine you can handle.
And mentioning special forces, that you had kind of, or even early on when you first got in Vietnam, you were already kind of thinking about, or had thought about 1049ing over to special forces or finding a way to eventually.
Yeah, I did. I mean, later, yeah, I did. I wanted to go to be in SOG because they were the guys that were right next to us in Phu, and we were out of Camp Eagle, and they were the ones, like, I got my Car 15 from, the FOB-1. The weapons that were old, they gave them to us. And so I'd met this one young, he was 1 year older than I was, but this one young officer in Recondo school, and he said, why don't you join us? You've got 6 months in the Lurps. You could 1049 into special forces. You have to sign up for another couple of years, but I went over to see him, and it saw an FOB-1, and he was MIA. And I went like, It was kind of like writing on the wall, and if you look at so many of those guys that are MIA were in SOG. I mean, they just
disappeared.
And I can tell you more about how, because I spent a lot of time in Vietnam, in the last 10 years, and found out why. The NVA, we were told they were dumb and they didn't have capacity and stuff. These guys had our logbooks, had our codes, they would stay and listen all night long to the guys talking back and forth on the radios. And, they figured out, this is how dumb we were compared to them. They figured out they could take Prick 21s, which they could buy in the black market in Saigon because the Arvins would sell them off. And so, but what they didn't have was the batteries. That was hard to get because the big heavy batteries that go into Prick 21. Well, they found out if they had a bunch of D cell batteries and put them in line, they could run the Prick 21. Well, how are they going to get D cell batteries? Well, in our great wisdom, we had the PSYOPs group or whatever the public relations group was giving the farmers radios and D cell batteries to run the radio so they could listen to Radio Free Europe. So, they were giving cases of these D cell batteries to they were turning around listening to all of our code stuff. This came out because some guys from, I forget which unit, these scouts had found a wire, and they traced it back and they got in a gunfight with these 12 NVA that was this alpha team that had they had code books, they had the SO, our standard operating procedures, they had everything to figure out. They had our call signs, all of this stuff. They were listening to us. So my general at the time, Westmoreland, was gone, and Abrams was our general when they told him, because all of the guys back at MACV, they thought that there must be spies because nobody could be that. They had Russian intelligence, special tech. No, it was our stuff they'd used against us, and he was like shocked to find this out. But so they were pretty smart, and I found out later they're good writers. The guys there's one guy that's written a book that I read it and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is so good, so wow. You don't ever want to underestimate your enemy.
No. I mean, I believe at that point in time, they were probably the most experienced Army at that point in time with all the fighting they've been doing.
Most of their dads were in the Viet Minh. So they had been fighting for 30 years, and we show up, they fought the French twice, beat them, and the Japanese beat them, and then we came in there.
Chinese.
They had this, it was really easy to beat us. Just hide, and we'll leave after a while. We get bored, or a new president comes in and they pull us out. I mean, it's like Ho Chi. Actually, people are not going to like this, but Ho Chi Minh is one of my heroes now because I found out so much about him. Because most guys don't realize that Ho Chi Minh had a code name called Lucifer back in World War II because he was going behind Japanese lines for the OSS. And I found pictures of him with these OSS officers. When I was in Hanoi a few years ago, I went to the archives, Ho Chi Minh archives, and there's pictures of him with U.S. Army officers, and yeah, there we go. So the guy in the center, that's Ho Chi Minh. These are all U.S. Army officers, OSS officers, And the guy right there is General Jap. And he was so smart. He got really pissed off because one time he got like an A- at the University of Hue when he was a kid. So he was brilliant. Ho Chi Minh spoke like, I want to say 7 languages. It was like amazing. And he had outsmarted the French. They've been trying to kill him for years and years and years. And everybody thought, well, he was a communist. Well, yeah. If you go back in the 1930s, everybody was over there, everybody was a communist. All it meant, everything, communism is like Stalin. No, that's a different form. Communism is if you're a farmer and you put all your food together and you sell it as a group thing, that's a communist. So, but we had it in our minds, the guys back in Washington, he's a communist. Well, he was also a nationalist, and he wanted to be a part of us. And I can tell you, I don't want to necessarily get into all of this, but that's part of what I'm writing about is how the letters he'd sent to Truman, and here's who betrayed us and betrayed him was the French, and not just the Vichy French. General de Gaulle convinced Truman and these people that, well, Ho Chi Minh's taking orders from the Soviet Union. He wasn't. He's taking orders from China. He wasn't. One time they asked General Jap about China, and he goes, "I'd rather cut off my
than take orders from a Chinese."
Yeah, from China. They hate China. And if we'd have been smart, like there's a place when you go to Hanoi, there's one museum and it has all the cannons that were used back 1,000 years. Most of them are fought against the Chinese. Well, these are all these different battles. They've been fighting the Chinese for 1,000 years. And when you go around, I had a guide take me. There's a little monument for the war it's called the American War. It's a little tiny thing, it's on this in town there, and then there's a monument for the battle against the French. The French had enslaved them for 100 years.
Oh yeah, and
it was just treated them like dirt. And anyway, so there's this big monument to the battle, against the French, the first war, the French war, and then up on the top of the hill, there's a giant tope with this great big. Look like a chapel that goes way up, and that's the monument to all the wars with the Chinese.
Wow, just a slew of them.
Yeah, even at the last time they fought them was when Vietnam went in and saved the Cambodians. They went in because the Khmer Rouge had been. This was back in 1979. They had been trying to take over parts of Vietnam, and so they sent the Vietnamese army in, which they lost 70,000 guys, which you never hear about. But they found all these bodies in the streets, and they found the killing fields and all that stuff. And one of my friends who's Cambodian, he will tell you that they were there. They stayed there on standby to protect Cambodia. Well, we thought they were spreading communism, and all this kind of stuff. No, and then the Russians. Well, this was all going on, and they had their army in Cambodia. The Chinese attacked 6 northern provinces and tried to take them over. The Russians came in, picked them up, flew them back up to Hanoi. They went up. There's a little ways to get up to China, and they kicked their ass, kicked them out. So that's, like they interviewed Ho Chi Minh one time, and they asked him about China because China was the soldiers that had. This is the brilliance of, at the end of the war, the Chinese were the occupational army in the north, and the French and the British were the occupational in the south, which they also brought in the French. But they asked Ho about the Chinese. He goes, I'm not worried. China does what it always does. They'll come in, steal as much as they can carry, and then they go home. That's what he thought about China.
Wow. Man, I mean, it's quite amazing how much warfare they had been enduring and would continue on, like you said. I mean, into the 70s with this. It's just crazy.
And it also showed how unprepared. What they gave us, 3 or 4 months of training. I think AIT was 6 weeks or so and stuff. And we're going up against guys that had been in battles, some of them for 10 years, against the French. and clear to the beginning of, we rotated out after a year. So our whole goal was to get back home, to get out. We weren't protecting our country. We weren't protecting America. We were told but as soon as you got in there, you realized that the Arbans didn't really care. We weren't protecting, we were just wanted to rotate and get back out. They were there for their country. I go to this one restaurant in Hue. And I'm talking about I go because I lived there for like the last 10 years there in Cambodia. And I have this one restaurant, the guy that owns it, his mother was a VC and his dad was an ARVN. So you can imagine the arguments they would have at home. But that's the way the country was,
Wow.
And they loved Ho Chi Minh. We hated him. They revered him.
Yeah, even during the war, the people in the South kind of revered him. It's.
Well, you'll hear, and I'll say it just depends on when and what you were doing, because you'll hear Vietnamese that are in America and they talk about how evil it all was. Well, they were ARVNs and they got the shit shot out of them. Their parent, people were killed. So they only have a perspective of a little bit. When you pull back and you look from 1940 all the way to 1974 when we left, you start to get a much bigger picture. My picture of the Vietnam War when I was younger was 365 days. Well, it was 15 months. That's it. And that's the same for, guys that did one tour or 2 tours or 3 tours or whatever many tours they did. And our tours were a year. They weren't 6 months. So that gets mixed up with, younger guys. Oh yeah, he's did 4 tours. Well, that's 2 tours for us, And if you're a Marine, it's even more,
Yes.
They've already got to do, if it was 12 for us, it's 13 for the Marines. Because they're tougher.
Man. Well, with all of this going on, what's it finally like to get on base and arrive on the compound and at Camp Eagle and start to meet the guys?
So now we're back in my war. It's funny because my mind is now like, these guys were great. They were unbelievable. They didn't treat me like some new guy like you hear about in the infantry. And I know what that's like. They, like in platoon, they put the new guys out in point. No, if you're in Lurps, the best guy in the platoon is walking point, or in the squad, in the team. You call them squads with that. But they would take you under your wing and just, I don't know if you interviewed Gary Linder in his book. Did you ever?
Yes, sir. We have.
Well, that November 20th, I was on the other teams. I was with Burnell. So I was out there. We heard the gunshots, but we couldn't get to them because we were, I don't know how many clicks away, but we were on the phone with them when they got wiped out. Well, the guys that went in to rescue them were the guys in our rear that jumped on helicopters. Like the one guy, T.T. Cicero, led the charge up the hill. He was still wearing his Ho Chi Minh sandals in his underwear, in his shorts, like a t-shirt. He just got out of a shower, grabbed his car 15 and jumped on a helicopter. That's where that thing, Lurps don't leave Lurps behind, really came from, because these guys were just freaking amazing, brave. And you'll never hear these stories because the narrative when we got back from the war was we were, baby killers and stuff like that. I never killed a baby in my life. It's like, that's the most insane thing that I've ever heard. But because there were pictures of, indelible in the minds of the public, like the little girl that's running that was burnt, or all that, then that gets washed over all the great things that the guys did that, like, I knew. And
those were South Vietnamese jets anyways.
You never hear that.
Yeah.
You never hear that part. It's always, we get blamed so much for stuff. If you go to Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City, and you go to the prison there, the old prison, outside is a guillotine that the French brought over back, 100 years ago. Well, what it says on the sign was, this is the guillotine, was invented by the French and brought here and used by the Americans to kill the loyal. I'm like, what? I remember I got back and I called up my friends. I go, did we have any guillotine training? Who drug a guillotine around? So we get blamed. It's just history is the last guy that wrote it down. Like they say, the winner gets to writes that story. And our story, our narrative over there is not good, So anyway, the guys were great, is all I want to say. I could go on with all the stories that I got to tell one story about a guy that's dead right now, but it's named Zojak. This guy was like the hardcore of the hardcore. He was from Massachusetts. And one time he got surrounded, and the guy, he was calling in artillery really close. And the guy said, well, you're too close. How do you know they're there? And he goes, well, why don't you want to listen to one? And he held the mic out so he could, he's like that close. He was just this incredibly brave, cool guy. And when he came home, he became a truck driver, literally in this first year back, and was up on a hill and lost his brakes. And down a railroad crossing, there was a bus, like a school bus, it turned out. So he took his truck went off the road and died. So he died a hero. You'll never hear those stories in the, back then. They just, didn't hear it from me, because I always try to tell anytime anybody asks me about him.
God, I mean, what a man. I mean, after all he went through to get back home and to face that decision and still go out a hero. Wow. I mean, geez Louise. We actually had a few questions dealing with your first arrival. And I've heard of these guys. I think it's Ray Martinez and a few others, but were any of the old foul dudes still pulling missions when you arrived? And could you tell us why they were called the foul dudes?
Well, they called themselves the old foul dudes, so I don't know where that came from. But if you were, I guess it was 1st Brigade Lurps, then they got absorbed into the F-58 Infantry Lurps, which is what I went to. And then magically on December 1st, 1969, we all became 75th Rangers. They took the 13 Lurp companies and they put them all under one umbrella, the Morel Marauders type historic umbrella, and they called us the 75th Rangers, and that's where that started. So I would be an old foul dude for the 75th Rangers, if I wanted. No, that's what the guys, when we came in, they were like known as the old foul dudes. I have no idea who coined that phrase, but it could have been a bunch of different guys.
Wow. I'm hoping to get in touch with Mr. Ray here soon. He's writing a book on Mad Dog Dolby, actually, and very eager to read about that. And hopefully we can have him on to talk about the book. Jed, we'll save that story because that one, I actually had that written down myself to talk about. But could you tell us what it's like when you're first getting there? I believe a guy, what was it, Schwartz, that ended up kind of taking you under his wing or showing you around a little bit, helping you get your car 15 or your weapon.
I was like Odie Coloni. I was like, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke pot, and I didn't cuss. And so I get there, and of course, there was a guy by name, not Ray Martinez, but we had another Marty Martinez, and he was an old foul dude, which meant he had a big body count. And so he's sitting around, and he says, yeah, the goddamn gooks. And I said, you shouldn't use the Lord's name in vain. Oh my God. I have to back up the story, go a little bit further back. I arrive like a month after somebody had put a mine, like a booby trap, the old commander of the LRRP unit, because he was a jerk, I guess. So he got his foot blown off, and then we get a new command. So I come in, and I'm a little bit too plain, and so Marty takes me aside and goes, if you're a narc, what was it? Sid, I guess is what it was. He said, I'm going to blow you away, personally blow you away.
CID, a guy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And so Schwartz, he goes, we need to get you seen a little bit
better than what,
So he goes, why don't you, and then Mazzaros was there, and he goes, why don't you go out with they would have when they were back in the rear, they would go outside of the wire to smoke dope. Some of the guys that, you know, like to smoke dope a lot. You should go with us just to be seen. And I'd never smoked dope in my life, but I figured this is my life. So I go, you know, and it was really weird because, you know, the machine gun net, we had machine guns set up, you know, at different parts of the camp, and we go outside the wire, you know, and there was a grave that, you know, one of their Vietnamese graves that guys would sit in, and you could always tell because there would be these little, you know, red things you could see out.
Back and forth.
And you didn't shoot them because they were our guys. But they also knew no officers would ever go outside the wire. You know, they would always stay back where it was safe. So it was safer out there. But so that word got around, you know. So I was like, whew, that was a close one. But yeah, and Schwartz, you know, they just show you what to do and who to stay away from and who, you know, to not correct their use of the word, their language.
And he was kind of the he was happy you were around now because he had been the previous FNG, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's great. And then I won't ruin it, but a great joke talking about I think Mr. Gary. You meet Mr. Gary, and he's talking about people from California, and it's just an absolute.
Well, it was constant. But I'm as quick as, actually I'm quicker than he is. So that worked out really well. But it was a constant jab at each other, you know, well, from California, I don't see any tailpipes coming out your ass. You must be gay, you know.
What? You ain't a hot rod.
Where do you get this stuff, you know? Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, but that was like,
no.
It's of death back then. That was the worst thing you could call somebody. And I go, well, you're from Missouri, right? I mean, are they still in the Union? I mean, you guys still fighting the Civil War, right? And it would this would go on until you go to sleep. You know, it was just back and boom, to boom, to boom, to boom. But it was, you know, fun. And he was in the first platoon and I was in the second platoon. That's why he was on the November 20th mission and we were in Burnell's team and we didn't get hit and he got hit. And then he came back later, but at least I had while he was in the hospital, I didn't have, you know, I had a reprieve.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of, as the kids say, ball busting going on amongst you guys.
You couldn't take it. You'd have to TO out. You might as well go to an infantry unit or go back in the rear and, you know.
That's hilarious.
Serve food or do something.
Yeah, that definitely wouldn't be the place for you. And then Sergeant Burnell, learning about his pain tolerance, and then that guy who tries to copy his unique feat of eating razors and light bulbs goes.
This is probably where old foul dudes came from because everybody tried to up each other. And Burnell had this trick, I guess, I would never try, but he would take a double-edged razor blade, put it in his mouth and break it and grind it. And he'd pretend like he'd swallow it. He couldn't have, of course, but he would break it down. And some medic that was drunk tried to do the same thing. And when he bent it down, it blasted out the side of his mouth. So, but also when I got there, there was just another kid that had just been out on a mission. And when he came back in, one of the things to prove how tough you were was they would take a frog and suck its guts inside out, you know, like that. So its eyes popped in. They thought that was really cool. I'm not saying I did anything like that. And they'll probably kill me because I can't remember his name, but I never really met him. But he did that, but he did it with this green, this lightish green tree frog, which is one of the most deadly frogs there were. He had a heart attack and died. And they thought he was joking around because he fell down and he was dead. So that happened. And then the mine for the captain happened. Then I show up after that. You know, they figured I'm there to investigate all this crazy stuff these guys were doing.
Wow.
But they just, that's how they entertained themselves. You know, there was no dating. There was no girls to go out with. You were stuck in this place with a bunch of guys. And there was called the juice heads, which was the guys,
drinkers.
Like Burnell was a juice head. And then there was the pot heads, there were the heads, they didn't call them pot heads, they were just the heads.
Oh,
and they would disguise them. And then there were the guys that drank Coke like me and, and stuff. And, they would one of the tricks that I learned to do was you take the Falstaff and pour all the Falstaff out, then fill it with Coke, and then walk around drinking Coke out of a Falstaff.
Okay, you're learning.
Going, yeah, there we go. You're drinking that good shit, or Ole, or whatever. Lucky Lager. I think that was a nice one. I think Falstaff was there. But you'd learn all these tricks so you could blend in, you know.
What a group to walk into, man, as a new guy. Wow. So what is it like when shall we say the first official mission where you're briefed, y'all go to I'm assuming the talk. What's it like when y'all are first spun up and get an actual mission to go out on?
Well, when you're a new guy, you don't go to you're not, that's where the
leader,
team leaders go and stuff. So you're just outside and follow whatever. So I did a couple of those missions, and then the big one was the November 20th mission, which it got so bad. And then there was also guys would rotate out, you know, and it was about that same time. So our platoon meeting was on a footlocker in our hooch. Then we got down to that few minutes. I think we were down to 23 guys from 80 or whatever it was. And so I became like an old guy. Like there was a really cool sergeant there by the name of John Burford, and he was a good old boy from Georgia. And I'll tell you, he was a hunter. I mean, he loved being out in the jungle. And he took me under his wing, and I walked point for his team. You know, I started walking point almost like in my third or fourth mission, whatever it was, and just became like the star, or became like, you know, if you were a point man, you did good. And, you know, you became, you know, just like anything, when you're going to play basketball and you line up and who you're going to choose, you know, same with who you're going to be as a point man, who's going to, you know, be rear security, who's going to be the slack, all that stuff. So so I'll jump way ahead to the lightning mission where we got, you'll probably bring that up, but this suddenly, Linder and I are on the same team. We're all sergeants by then. So this was near the last of Linder's time there. And I think I'd been through Recondo school and thought I was pretty cool and all this stuff. And yeah, that's me, and there's Gary Linder. And so we're going into the Ashau Valley. Well, the last guys that had been in the Ashau Valley was the 173rd, and they lost 26 helicopters in 27 minutes or something like that. So they had gotten their ass kicked out of the Ashau Valley. And the only guys that were going in there were SOG teams, and they were coming up sometimes MIA. Mm-hmm. So we're going in. We're the first LRRP team to go in. So I'm setting the stage because I'm in the talk and I'm in the front row. Behind me is, you know, the officers, and the guys are artillery, and then behind them are the pilots. And this guy's giving this one captain is giving he's up on the map showing us where we're going to go in on this hill. And then up here is the 4th of the NVA regiment. We think there's about 4,000 NVA here. Down here is the 5th NVA. You know, there's sapper platoon here, or a sapper group here. There was like 10,000 NVA in the valley, and there's 6 of us going in. So I raised my hand, and it was like, what? I said, sir, should we even bring any food? And everybody goes, Chambers, shut the fuck up. He was throwing stuff at me. But I thought, hey, we're going to obviously die. So I figure, why bring a bunch of extra, you know, food? I'll just bring some more, you know, magazines. But so I would make fun of everything. It just would piss Linder off because I didn't take anything seriously, you know, and he was all serious. And he was, you know, of course he had a girlfriend that he was going to marry, and
not to mention his premonitions that he's plagued with.
Oh yeah, he had a premonition that him and I were going to die, and you'd watch me get blown up and stuff like that. And I was going, oh, cool.
Yeah, I can only imagine what he's thinking with you saying that. Yeah. Jeez Louise. Gary, what a guy. What a guy.
I won't spoil the ending, but we did live.
Oh, geez. I mean, yeah, guys, y'all have heard me bring up the story of Fred Wunderlich Fred Lightning, as he was later known, ended much like this. It ain't just a lightning strike. I'll put it that way. It goes haywire pretty quick.
Well, you want to tell what happened? I mean, we're there, so I guess I should tell it.
If you want to, I mean, yeah.
Well, this turned out to be what we think was Hamburger Hill, and so and if I match my medical records up the date that we got hit, it's the date of the day before Hamburger Hill. So we were the LRRP team in there, and we'd spent 5 days, and I was walking point, and we could hear. Matter of fact, I brought something I'm going to show you. We heard like chainsaws or whatever it was up on the top of the ridge, and cutting, building bunkers.
Woodcutters
Or something, but we were chopping. Maybe it wasn't chainsaw, maybe they didn't have them back, but we were chopping up on the top of the ridge. So we just went below the ridge. And matter of fact, I'll show you this real quick.
Oh yeah.
This is from one of my recent trips back there, and I climbed up to the top of Hamburger Hill, and I found this.
Holy,
it's one of the bunkers, part of the bunkers. It was laying up there, So you're not supposed to take stuff from that. It's like a sacred thing now for the Vietnamese, but I stuck it in my backpack and nobody knew about it.
You can see the cut marks of the axes that they would use. I mean, that is perfectly
pretty primitive, but and they would set the. So anyway, they had this all built in the mountain. Anyway, the last day, and we're going to get out that next morning. We're all kind of excited. Yeah, not letting anything down because we were watching 100 NVA a day moving down below us. We were spotting them. And so Mother Rucker, which you probably have heard that name, he was our radio man. And you've got to call in if there's Rucker. It's this Swiss. Is
Swedish K.
Yeah. He was a pretty cool guy. Anyway, he was our radio guy, and he keyed the hand. When you're on the mountain where Ashau Valley is, it's right on the border of Laos. So you got the big mountains right there. And every day about 4 o'clock, the storms would come in. So it's storming, and it had rained a little bit, like hard rain, and then it stopped. And so you have to call in the SITREP, situation report. When he keyed the handset, just before he did that, I remember looking at my Claymore. We'd set Claymore mines all around us. And I was looking at the back of mine, reading it, going like, this might be too close. If I'm reading the back of this thing, the back blast is going to kill me. So I went down and I moved it further down the hill. I come back and I was sitting there, and the next thing, the lightning hits us. We didn't know it was lightning, but just like it's enormous white light. And I just remember like disintegrating. It felt like I disintegrated into just like, and the last thing I said, I mean, you would think it would be some kind of prayer or something, but the last thing I said was, fuck. I can still remember saying it. It's like, God, what the fuck? Like, boom. And then the next thing I know, I wake up and I'm laying on my back down this hill, and it's quiet. And I don't hear anything, my ears were still ringing, and I looked down at my legs, and steam was coming off of my legs, and I was going like, oh, this can't be very good. And I couldn't move them, and I could move my hands, move my arms, and kind of look around, and I kept waiting. I thought the NVA hit us. I was waiting for somebody to come up, cut my throat, which makes it really difficult afterwards for getting a haircut, because anytime somebody puts their hands near my throat, I go, But I just turned, I didn't know where my rifle was or anything. So I turned around and I started crawling back up the hill, and I found my car 15, and I found where we were setting, and I found my clacker. The clacker is the thing that blows the Claymore mine, was burnt, was melted. The hard plastic was melted. And so what we figured was when the lightning came down, it went out and it blew up all of our Claymores. So we had the back blast of the Claymores. Linder had a percussion grenade. He was packing that blew him way the hell down. And so we got not only the lightning, but the back blast. I had an electrician at my house, and I told him this story. And I said, well, the good thing, I always would say I got hit by lightning, but I couldn't have gotten hit by lightning. Or no, You got hit by lightning, but you were grounded because we were all laying on the ground. He said if somebody would have been standing up, they would have been electrocuted. But we were grounded, just like they tell you to do, you know? So anyway, I climbed back up there, and there's this black spot where the team had been, and no one was there. There was no one there. And I thought, I'm all by myself. I can't walk. Luckily, I got my car 15, and that's it. And there's nobody here. And I couldn't hear anything. And then I felt something on my shoulder, and it was Sowers, John Sowers. He came up, and then we found Rucker was mumbling next to the radio that was all burnt out and stuff like that. And then Tubby Clausen was down. He came up, and I spotted Linder. I don't know if he told you, but I went down. I crawled down to Linder, who was in the laying on his stomach, and I saw him like in the kind of gurgling in this mud thing, and I rolled him over in his stomach, and he was still alive. And I go, Linder, you're just faking it. Why don't you get up? You know, and I was giving him shit. And he goes, Chambers, no, get out of here. Leave me alone. He wanted to kill me. But I thought, you know, it's a good time to get at him right now while he's down. But, you know, Sowers and I drug him back in with no radio. You know, our commo was gone. And what I remember was some 17th Cav chopper saw this enormous blast and came over to investigate, because remember, suddenly out of nowhere, it's like God sent this angel. A helicopter was right above us, and then he left. And then the next thing we know, John Looney was a radio relay. He'd called in a medevac, and it was still really steep and high, you know, trees and shit. So we had to go up through the we took Linder up through a
jungle penetrator,
and we went up on the penetrator. And poor Clausen, he'd gotten hit. The blast had hit him where his face was all contorted. And I mean, he came back, but he wasn't that good looking anyway, so it didn't really make much difference. But it was all contorted. His pants were blown off, and he was like, we were going up in the penetrator, and he's like leaning. Yeah, that's him. See, I'm better looking than him, and much better looking than Linder. So he gets hit, and he's like leaning back, looking, and I'm holding on to him, you know, as we're going up. And we found out later that that medevac had like a bunch of bullet holes in the back, in the boom that goes out in the back. So you're sitting ducks when they're trying to pull you up through a penetrator. Oh yeah. And then the last guy out was Sowers, and Williams. Let's see, I think it was Williams. I forget his name. But we get back to Camp Eagle, and they roll us in. The doctors can't even figure out what's going on because we're all burnt. Yet, like, it didn't make any sense, and paralyzed and stuff. And then we finally figured out what must have been lightning, but it was just bizarre, you know.
I mean, between that one and you and Dixie Dog in the ammo bunker, I honestly don't know how just on those two you survived. I mean, the Dixie Dog story is insane in my opinion. I don't know how.
If we go way back, and I was telling you how, you know, I told Martinez, you know, shouldn't use the Lord's name in vain, and he threatened me. I think he like sort of carried out the threat, because it wasn't, but I was brand new. So I'm on bunker guard duty, and my breath tasted like dog shit. My breath never tastes like dog shit. Anyway, kind of broke my concentration. So I'm on guard duty, and I got to go to the ammo bunker, which is underground, to get the ammo for the machine gun and the claymores. So I go in there, and the last guys in there look like they just wrapped up their claymore mines and stuck them in. And you have to go down. There's a flap over it, and you go down in the ground, and on above there's this PSP, you know, steel, really heavy steel. And on top of that is like, you know, sandbags piled up high. You know, it's just really an ammo bunker thing. And so I'm in there, and I reach for the claymores, and when I pulled on it, I heard this. Oh. And I could look through it and could see that like a fire, like a grenade, like and it had like a 15-second delay fuse on it, whatever. So that was burning. So I turn around, and I run, you don't run inside that thing, but I, make my way out. And as I get out, here comes Dixie, smelling around and I grabbed her and held her. And then I ran down there was this bunker and I dove into it. And as I got in, I'm holding on to her and she's trying to get away when kaboom, this thing blows. And I mean, there was, hand grenades and machine gun bullets going off, and those PSP things were blanging down. And Dixie was going crazy when she pulled off. I held on. I still had her collar. Matter of fact, I still have her dog tags. This is Dixie Dog on it. I don't know if you can see that. Probably backwards or anyway. So I had her. She took off. So I'm like the Captain Eklund. He had thought that the North Vietnamese, like a MiG had come in. He thought we got bombed, because we're always ready for that. It was just me that blew up the ammo dump. So I come walking out after, the CS gas dissipates and stuff. There's all of our guys are way up on the hill looking down. And I sort of came up and went like, it's just me, hey, no, I said, fire in the hole. I mean, I didn't even know what to say, like everything's okay. And I went up there, and of course, that night I got pulled into a bunch of captains were interviewing me about what had happened. And I remember saying at the time, because I went back on bunker duty, and I remember Bedrin, it was Bedrin. He goes, man, what you've been through, you need to take a couple of these. That was like our speed. Well, back then, the Army gave us speed to stay awake. It wasn't illegal, but the way the Lurps did it was. So if you're supposed to take one, they take 12. So he gives me a bunch of these, and now I'm speeding. And now I get called up to the wherever the officers were, that room, and I'm in there sitting down, and and Bedrin is with me because he witnessed the whole thing. And they go, well, I was a Spec 4, he was Spec 4 Chambers. So describe what happened. I said, well, I walked in and blah, blah, and I pulled this thing, and man, when it blew, it was like green and red, white and red. It was like fantastic. And it blew, and then Bedrin was punching me in the side, and I go, oh, what else happened? And then I went outside and I saw Dixie Dog, and I grabbed her, and then I ran and I jumped in, and blah, 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 and he would keep. I was like way too hyper, Anyway, They didn't bust me for blowing up the thing, but I really think it was my good friend Marty had decided that he would, end my military career, because that's how you got rid of guys. Pretty much was,
mistaken. See ya.
Yeah. See you later.
Did Dixie show back up?
Huh?
Did Dixie ever show back up? She did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Around.
Gosh, I can't.
She got, after we'd left, I think a Vietnamese family had taken her in. They didn't eat her.
Thank God. I've heard too many tales about y'all's dogs being eaten. Gosh.
Yeah. I've got a terrible story, which of course I'll tell. But I went to Condau Island. This was about 10 years ago. Condau Island was where it used to be called Devil's Island, and that's where the French used to put the captured Viet Minh.
Okay.
And we used it, the Arvins used it to put NVA and civilians and anybody else that they wanted to. And I didn't realize that, it was a real sacred place, like something like 10,000 prisoners had been, killed there. Our good friends, the South Vietnamese and the French. And here's what's really interesting: the way the prison was laid out. Because I visited Germany, and I went to Dachau like back in the 70, 74 or 5 or something. So I'd seen like the Russian concentration camp. This was laid out just like it. But then I started thinking, well, let's figure this out. This thing was built in 1939. Well, who were the Vichy, 1941, I guess it was. Who were the Vichy French in bed with? The Nazis. So they probably had one of their designers come over, because this thing was laid out like it. And the island used to be called Devil's Island. So there's still a little town in there. And by the way, when you go there, I stayed in would have been like a 4-star hotel on the beach with a great view, and it cost me like $80 a night or $40 a night, because the Vietnamese do not go there because it's like all these people died, so they're not going to go visit that place. That's other tourists go there. But I'm walking around downtown, and I heard this blood curdling scream from a dog, and I looked over, and some local guy had the dog on a collar and was beating it to death with he had a big stick, mallet, and it wasn't dying right off, and my reaction was to go over and beat the shit out of this guy, but I realized this is this guy's dinner. So I had to stand there and take it and listen to this blood curdling thing. And then once it died, he hung it up and skinned it out. And I talked to the young Vietnamese, because they own dogs. They have dogs now. There's pets. And he goes, yeah, that's our grandfathers. They still eat dog. They might tell you they don't, but they've still raised this certain kind of dog and I've seen them raise thing for barbecuing. So that's the only thing I don't like about the Vietnamese. The rest of the stuff is okay, but the older folks still do. That's a delicacy. Hey, but we eat cows. I mean, if you're in India, they think we're like, breaking sacred
heathens and yeah, exactly. Because Recondo is popped up or will be popping up, but I was curious on wasn't it one of your was it one and the same the where you ended up carrying the M60 when y'all were looking for that Cosvin radio to destroy, or is that two different operations?
Two different operations. That M60 was like somebody said one time, oh, you guys never carried M60s? Here's a picture of it, asshole. Yeah, there we go. There's Sowers now. That was some other mission. I don't remember what it was, but I had to rappel with that M60 on my back one time, and it threw me off, because of the weight, and I'd never rappelled with something like that. We rappelled out a helicopter, to get down, but yeah, so we carried them.
Is that your NVA belt buckle?
No, this is way before. That's how come I know it's not Lightning mission, because I had been wearing it. So I can always tell by the belt buckles I wore what month it was. But that was our standard issue Army thing, I guess.
Wow, with the world famous tiger stripes that y'all wore so much. That
we got from Special Forces. They were the ones that gave them to us. We had nothing from the frickin' Army. It was so sad. The rifles that we got jammed half the time. It was, the government send these guys over. And I found out later, I got the same pay that my father did in World War II. That's how much they jacked us off around. They got to really think about it. They got to pay us with $1940. So they saved all that money. They were paying us shit.
That's
and then the equipment that we got, I mean, that AK-47, you could throw it in the mud, cover it in water, pull it out, and it's fire perfect. You put an M16 in mud, and it's not going to fire. So we had the shit stuff, and thank goodness for the Special Forces. They got us like Car 15s at least fired, and Tiger fatigues.
Wow. I was always glad to hear, and especially you said offline that you actually got your Car 15 from a FOB1 guy.
Yeah. And it didn't really always fire. Sometimes it would double feed, because what they would do is they'd cut the spring down. So the trick, so when you, on the Car 15, there's the little selector lever switch, and it goes, semi and then full automatic and all. Well, you cut the spring down where you just tap it and it goes to full automatic. Ooh. So mine had been cut down, but here is the problem. Sometimes you get in a firefight and I would go click and nothing would happen. So if you look at the cover of, I'll tell you a secret, the cover of Death in the Ashau Valley. Look at that picture. Okay. If you see the little thing sticking out underneath the barrel,
your cleaning rod, right?
Yeah, I had my cleaning rod taped to it because I'd have to break the cleaning rod off and kick the jam out. And you can't really see that in there. I probably jammed and I'd already done it, but so anyway, I would leave it on there, and I used to think, what are those NVA thinking? They look over, and it looked like I was like Davy Crockett,
packing a musket,
but I didn't care because I thought the gun looked cool. So even if it meant it might jam, I always thought, yeah, but at least I'll die with a really cool pistol or rifle.
It definitely looked the part. It was the cool guy gun of that
and
time.
It was great for point man because it was so small. I didn't like the 16; it was too long, but I could get around stuff, so much easier.
Collapse stock
yeah. And if I got up that first round, if I knew I had at least one good first round, it's like those old guys that when you were a kid and you went hunting with, and they had a single shotgun, and they'd come home with more pheasants than you did. And you had an automatic. You fired every round in your gun plus 3 more, and they'd have one shot. But because you had one shot, you
made it count.
Right.
Wow. That man, Car 15s. It's just love seeing the photos of y'all with them.
They're going to be so famous. I would have went to Colt and cut a deal because all my pictures are with a Car 15.
I'm honestly surprised with when they do reissues, they don't get in touch with some of you guys because that is a heck of a publicity photo right there for them.
Yeah, you'd think.
Oh, it absolutely is. How long was it exactly? If you even remember, was it a shorter or a long period of time before you got orders to Recondo school?
Well, you had to be in country for 6 months.
6 months.
And then so you were on a list, and you had to be good guy. And then you had to volunteer on top of that to go.
Oh.
But it was like a 6-month period. So they wanted somebody that at least, had been out in the woods before they went there. Because what they were training you for was to become a team leader. So you learned everything, from, using blood expanders, which was really funny because in Recondo school, we'd have to put a big needle, in our arm for the, the blood expander, we had to put it in the other guys and then ours. And the needles, like you could see the hole. It's not like these little baby needles now where you don't even feel it. This thing, and to push it into yourself, I don't know. I can still remember that was the worst part of Recondo school, was the needle in the arm thing.
I think there's some footage online, and I would show it, but I might get a copyright strike of y'all doing needle and drawing blood and all that, and I just can't help it.
They'll throw up if you show that.
Oh, needles are when I get blood drawn, I have to look away. Listen, I'm not a big fan of needles at all.
Not a fan of blood, especially my own. It's supposed to stay inside.
Absolutely, where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
There's the famous front gate.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen that picture.
I've gotten lucky and wound up with a few.
That's Reynolds. That's Reynolds. That's my buddy that got killed right there, walking right. Even though it's blurry, I can see by his body shape. So that's our class. But that's Ron Reynolds. Ron Reynolds got killed about 2 months later. I was flying belly, and he even told me, "I'll show you. I painted a picture of him and Zodiac, but I walked past him. He was looking really weird because I was going to be putting them in, and he goes, "I'm not going to make it back." I mean, he knew he was going to die, and I went like, my sense of humor. I go, "Well, if you're going to die, better take your picture." So I got the last picture ever taken of him. But that's Ron Reynolds. I became really good friends with his mom and sisters and stuff. And he is from not Kentucky, in can't think of a name. I'll think of it later, but
here's some class photos of some of the course live fire that y'all would have to the final test, like the SOG 10 is a live fire operation, which is very
the last week of Recondo school, the graduation mission, you go out on you go out on a live mission. And that's where I caught this NVA officer. I also got in a firefight and, shot up some guys earlier that day.
And did you the belt you ended up getting, but was it still in effect to where, I know the SOG had a thing to where if you captured a prisoner, you could you got an extra R&R?
Yeah, I did. I got an R&R to Hawaii, and then the old LePage was the SF sergeant with me. I say old, he was probably 30 years old, which is like nothing now, but he came up to Camp Eagle and he brought us a bunch of McGuire rigs, stable rigs, the latest stable rigs. So those guys later on in the 70s that were using stable rigs are because of me. He showed up with a bunch of them for us, and he got me a R&R to Hawaii.
He in the book, and won't give it away, but he sounded like he was quite the guy. A little bit, maybe he wasn't. You didn't think he was all that fond of you at first, but it seemed like you became his favorite guy at the end.
Yeah, he wasn't fond of anybody unless you've proven yourself, But I'm walking point and I'm way out there, and the way it is your slack man. What happens? You empty a magazine, turn around and start running back. Your slack empties his magazine, and you leapfrog back out. So I get, I come upon these like a whole bunch of NVA, and they're sitting there and they're looking at me like, there's a bunch of them. So I fire and I go through the thing and I turn around to run. And the guy that was the slack and then another guy, they were just hightailing it back out. And one of them was an SF captain. He was just there to get his Recondo patch. He was like, there's rear echelon. So there's a thing about officers and enlisted men in the Vietnam War. You never saw an officer, unless it was special forces usually, out on patrols or anything. Anything above E7 stayed back in the rear, or they were up in a helicopter calling it. That's the only time, that they became managers of the war. We were the workers, and the NVA and the body count was the production, and that was the first time that ever happened. But in the past, officers would lead the charge. They would be out, out in front. Well, I saw one of the guys and he wasn't out in front, and so the only thing I could do was I turned around, stuck another magazine in and started firing. Suddenly, out of nowhere, LePage comes up, get out, he's yelling. I can hear him yelling. He gets up and he's got a cut down
M79.
M79, yeah. Hey, you know more about this than I do. He's got a cut down, and he fires it, and I just remember it hitting a tree and going over my head, and went, whoa. And so him and I get out of there, and we're sitting around, and he was fucking pissed off at this SF captain. Like, he was going, you guys just stay out of my, and so we sight. And you could do that in SF when you're, old school E7, because this guy, they ran the freaking Army. I mean, back then, Special Forces was the thing. And if you were an SF and you were an officer, you usually got out because you couldn't go so high. They'd only go so high because the regular Army hated them, SF, hated the Lurps, because we weren't like, the standard, the way the Army is supposed to run. But so he pulled us back in, and then we were going to we got the CIDGs. They brought in helicopters, and so we had like 100 of these guys. So he had me and Duty. Duty was my slack, and I walked point. I want you to walk point. And then he was the third guy. And then behind us was like all of these, mercenary, all of these CIDG guys, Montagnards and stuff. And so I'm walking, I'm like, this is my dream come true. I'm leading like into a battle, all these guys, I was thinking, and my mind's weird, but I was thinking that. So I actually found I was really good in the jungle at knowing where to go, found my way back, and there sitting around in a circle was, I guess it was 13 or something like that, backpacks full of their stuff, and so I literally ran into that group, and then they took off. So they were, our guys came in and they were searching through the backpacks, and I started wandering, kept following a trail, and I was walking along, and suddenly this guy stepped out from behind a tree, and like he was maybe 10 feet from me and stuff, and I could see real quick he didn't have a weapon. So I wasn't going to shoot an unarmed guy. I mean, just I don't care, and I know you're supposed to and all that shit, but he turned around and he started to run, and I ran after him, and I thank my football stuff for it, because I tackled him, hit him on the ground, got him on the ground, stuck my carp. He started yelling to his buddies or something, and I wanted him to shut up, and he wouldn't shut up, and so I stuck my Car 15 in the side of his mouth, and I'm on top of him like this. And I remember LePage, he finally gets there and he goes, "Chambers, I wouldn't pull the trigger." And I looked down and it was aimed right at my balls. Like, okay, that's probably not a good way to capture a guy, but we won. Or I got, anyway, they took him out the next day through like a McGuire rig, and that's why I went back to Condal prison. Almost all this stuff, like later in my life, which is now, I would go back and try to find the places and try to find where, like in the Rung Valley, where we had these ambushes and a bunch of stuff happened there. I would match the dates of I had a medal for that stuff. So I would match the dates of the firefight, and I found present day memorials with all these names and dates. So I could find the 5 guys that we killed on this one ambush, and I would put light incense, and honor their death. And like one of my paintings, actually, I've got it right. This painting right, where is it? Maybe you can see it right here. That one, if you don't see it, but behind it, I put, those are all Vietnamese names. Wow. So I made my own wall for them.
That's amazing work. My God, that's beautiful work.
Actually, Ed said, you need to show your paintings. I mean, all these ones on the other side I did too. And that's a Vietnamese girl from a picture back in the day, 68, I guess it was.
Someone just asked, do you sell any pieces, or do you make any for custom order, your paintings?
I do custom orders, but it's like, if you looked at my house, and I'll just kind of spin this around, you will see everywhere you look are paintings. You went in, and I just did this one over here. This is one of my favorites of Einstein. Oh. So I can do pretty much anything. And if I showed you around the corner, there's just stacks of paintings, and I do them kind of for myself. I used to sell what's called a giclée, where they take a picture of it, and then they make a copy. And I've got one guy that bought every single painting I ever did, and it was paying me $500 for these copies, for these things. So it's just, there has to be a meaning behind it. There has to be a reason for me to do it, but I guess I do custom orders and stuff, but it costs a lot of money.
Yes, but people are very, very happy seeing your paintings. They are beautiful, and I'm sure I'll get contacted to ask you if you will do any special, because some people have already said that's why I brought it up. I think they would like to buy some, actually, so I'll keep you abreast of that. They're beautiful. There was we'll hit a few questions here as we're transitioning. This one actually deals with Recondo School. Did you know any of the other classmates, which I have a question about too, other than Spec 4 Roberts, Sergeant Reynolds, Corporal Duty, and from the 101st, Moots, Elledge, Otto, and Escamilla?
No, I didn't know those guys, but the Roberts, Reynolds, and Duty, we were kind of like we went there together. So Duty and I were on the same team. Reynolds was on, and Roberts were on a different team at the end, when they went out. But I didn't know the other guys. But there was one guy that they take him from everywhere. Like
The pararescue guy.
Para-air rescue, you know, which was a big deal. And so they had 2 para-rescue guys in there. And the one guy invited me to his play. They were at not Tonson, but the Air Force Base at Benoit. So I go out there, and this is quite a while later in my. So I've probably been there for a year or something like that. But we did the thing that everybody does when you get together. Jack Daniels somehow shows up, and I'm not a big drinker, but if I drink too much Jack Daniels, my ego gets gigantic. You know, I think I'm like the coolest thing there is. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this Air Force guy. Air Force guys are cooking steaks. We didn't have cooking steaks. I mean, I think of like one steak the whole year I was in Vietnam, but they're cooking steaks and stuff like that. And over on one side is a weight bench. They're lifting weights and all this stuff. So I said, I forget this guy's name. It's in the book, but I jumped off the bunker.
Rhodey, I think. Rhodey.
Rhodey. I peed on the steaks. And the guys got pissed off about it. I don't know why. So Brody thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He was laughing like shit. And so I climbed back up there and I looked down, and there was just like, it looked like hundreds of these guys were coming at me, like 30 guys, and of course I've got my 101st Airborne, patches, both sides, CIB jumping. I look like a Christmas tree, and they're in their Air Force stuff with just Air Force, whatever their stripes are. And so I jump off and I confront this guy who's like a foot taller than I am. And I got my K-bar on, and he's going, I'm going to knock, did you pee on these steaks? He goes, yeah. What's the big deal? He kept telling me what he was going to do to me. And I go, well, I got a K-bar, and if you want, I'll just cut your throat. I was just like, So suddenly the APs, Air Police showed up, and thank goodness, got him away. So I get back up on the bunker, and this pretty guy's laughing like shit. And pretty soon they showed back up. There was like more of them this time. So he goes, let me go. I go, okay, you go first. So he jumped off and dives on the guy, and they're just fighting like shit. And I go, well, I can't leave him there, right? So I dive into the pile. When I hit the ground, I was on the ground, and nobody was hitting me or nothing was going on. So I just kind of low crawled out of there, and I went over and I found one of their bunk bed, their bunkers or their tents, tents. And I found an Air Force shirt. So I took mine off and put on the Air Force shirt, and I laid down in the bunk, and I slept there that whole night. And then those guys were searching for me all night long, back and forth. And I did feel bad about what I did, Brody, but I figured they wouldn't kill him because he's one of them. So the next morning about 0500, I got out, walked out to the guard thing and put on my 101st shirt. Waved by and left. I looked Brody up later, and he got a Silver Star for a rescue in North Vietnam. He went in some big, Air Force helicopter got shot down, I guess, in 1970 or something. But if you look his name up, you'll see Silver Star. And when you go through, you find out, he got out, went down, got out of the helicopter, rescued these guys, drug them back in, put them in. But these guys were hardcore.
That's he sounded like and from the guys, the SOG guys we've spoken to, one of them went in to become a PJ, and they sound like they for the Air Force, of course, now you've got the JTACs and the 24th Squadron, but they sounded like they were the creme de la creme of the Air Force at that point in time.
I would say my luck was I was always around those kind of guys. I wasn't one of those guys, but I was around those kind of guys, So you
can't be around one of those guys if you're not one of those guys. I know you're humble and won't say that, but it's abundantly clear from.
I'm more humble than Linder, but other than that, I'm not as humble as that man, but I'm more humble than Linder.
I love that. Linder's gonna love seeing this.
He hates it. He'll have something to say just like that. He's quick. His mind hasn't gone. I think he doesn't have an Alzheimer's, but he doesn't. He's still okay. I sent Linder. I was living in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, a few years ago, and I get these things about a reunion going back to, in Missouri, where Linder lives. He's gonna have a big reunion. I go, hey, asshole, you want to have a reunion? Come here. let's have a reunion with them. You know, I'll set it all up. I got all these Vietnamese guys, never heard anything. But I thought, what a great place.
That would be pretty interesting. All of y'all together like that. That would be really.
Miller, you've read his name a bunch of times.
I've definitely heard about the man. Yes.
Yeah,
not met him though.
Well, him and I got in a bunch of fights with other guys, not each other. But he just recently, his kid, who was super smart, he married a Taiwanese girl, Wei Li, and they've had their daughter's like a PhD, her son's got a PhD, super smart. Ken speaks 2 different dialects of Chinese, but he, so his son took him back to Vietnam, and they went to Hamburger Hill, and he goes, your picture's there. I went, what? Because I spent a bunch of time there, and I guess my picture's if you go to the station where, you go up there, I'm there,
Yeah.
And I've got one in the bars. Any bar that I went to in Phnom Penh, I always made sure I left a picture of, Vietnam picture, stuff like that.
That's
awesome. Leave my mark.
That's you're the Ranger equivalent here of Walt Shoemate when his little prank of everyone signing Walt Shoemate whenever they check in or get in trouble or what have you. He left his mark all over Southeast Asia as well. One of the and I was interested. I'm glad Jed brought this up because Recondo School is infamous for having foreigners, Australians, ROC Marines. I didn't know until reading this ties, but Longton also had some Australians through some of it, the 1-0, some of it was classified. But could you talk about the Recondo School graduation photo?
The guy that said I'm Nui, like if you look at that picture, which one? Nui is on my right, I guess it was. I think I can't really see it very well. But anyway, this guy was amazing. One of the things we had to do every day was put on a 30-pound sandbag, and they would measure it. If you had any lighter, you get kicked out of school. On a pack, full LB, your low-bearing equipment, with magazines and your rifle, and we'd have to run. Start with a mile run and work up to 12 miles, I guess it was. And you had to do it in so much time. Nui would beat everybody. These guys were amazing. And the first time I went back to Thailand, I got a hold of him. I found out, I found him. I couldn't find him through the records or the government or anything. I asked one of my, like the bellman, and he goes, he came back, here's his phone number. I said, where'd you get it? White Pages, in the telephone book. Like, and I talked to him, and he remembered duty more than he remembered me. But he lived up in north. Chiang Mai is one of these really great places in Thailand, and he lived about an hour inland or hour from there. But he has 60 grandchildren and children, and so how many do you have? And I go like 2. That's the difference between Americans and Thais. But he'd been married to the same woman and had all these kids, and the kids had kids, and the kids had kids. 60. So they're the ones, that's doing all the population explosion. I'm trying to keep it down. That's why I've had so many divorces and keep it,
Now was he one of the Thais that was the stiletto winner, the honor graduate?
Actually, Reynolds was the honor graduate.
Oh, Reynolds. Okay, wow.
I thought it was going to be me because of the officer deal, but Reynolds scored high. The special forces, you capture somebody, big deal.
That's everyday occurrence.
Yeah, they were going by the points, and Reynolds had just beat out Nui, by a little bit. Nui was the fastest runner, but Reynolds did a bunch of other stuff better.
Wow.
The map reading, they were all the tests that you took added up and be the honor graduate. But it was Ron Reynolds.
Wow, that's outstanding. Outstanding. I know there was one. Please don't go blank on me. The Recondo School question. It just left my mind. Yep.
Oh, you're talking about troops. I got a story for you. This is really great. So you're asking, you talking about the Thais. So there was,
ROC Marine. That was the next one.
These ROC Marines. So it's basically the Royal Korean Army. And we were told to stay away. You know, don't, they're not going to be your friend. Don't get around them, stay away. We had this one guy that was pretty cocky, and we'd have to run in the morning, like I said. We had to run down to the, and then we would get on the
trucks and such,
and they'd drive us to the next thing. So this guy, one of our, I'll call him white-faced guys, you know, one of these us type guys,
round ass,
American, duh. He jumps up in the Rock Marines deuce and a half. And so the guy that was the sergeant, that was his seat, he said, you know, get up, whatever he said in Korean, to get out. And he wouldn't do it. Well, he had just lost face in front of his platoon. So he had to kill the guy. He was supposed to kill him. So he reaches up, grabs the guy down, and he was, you know, about to cut the guy's head off when the special forces guys also, you know, almost became a big gunfight. But I was standing there watching this thinking like, whoa, and these guys are on our side. I'm glad they're, whoa. It was pretty scary because all their guys were armed and all our, you know, our guys are armed, but that would have been quite a little showdown in the old OK Corral. But we learned very quick not to fool. Here's the difference. The way an American soldier does guard duty, they're kind of smoking a cigarette, leaning back, waiting for looking at the watch. With the rocks are like this, in attention the whole time. And if the guy screws up, the private screws up,
gets beaten.
The captain, well, it starts at a higher rank. The captain beats the lieutenant beats the shit out of the sergeant beats the shit out of the next guy down, and the last guy just gets pummeled. So they believe in corporal, I guess it's called corporal punishment, or that's how they're staying line. They spank their kids.
My dad had some stories about the Rock Marines that he had with his unit, and he said, boy, even the NVA treaded lightly around those
they
boys.
Stayed away from them because they killed everything. You know, they would go in and, there's our deuce and a halves. That's not a deuce and a half right there, but that one they just lowered, that's, wow. Matter of fact, this is unbelievable. I did a Recondo school tape for the History Channel. This was several years ago. And so the guy who was the producer of the History Channel, you could get all of the archive tapes. And he found, matter of fact, you could probably.
That's you right here.
Well, you'll see, if you go back to the beginning of this one, if you go to the very beginning, let's see where it starts.
Maybe a different one.
Yeah, it's a different one. Anyway, the very first guy is me. Well, that's me. That's my interview. But he found these old archive tapes, and I forgot, but they were filming us during that thing. And so he goes, "You need to come down here." So I drove down to Burbank, and where he lived, and there's Ray Martinez right there.
There you are, right there.
He goes, "You're not going to believe this." And I go, "What?" He goes, "You're in the tape." And I went, "You got to be kidding me." So that's the way he says, "Look at this, you know, boom." So that was me calling in artillery. But I thought, wow, you know, because guys will say, "Oh, were you really in Vietnam?" Now I can go, click, here you go.
I couldn't believe when I first saw that, and then somebody else sent me some other photos of you. I think this might be before your graduation mission. You will know better than I. Right here.
Well, that wasn't in Recondo school. That was me.
Oh, okay.
It was earlier.
I got faulty info on that one then.
Yeah, bad info. But it was probably in my fourth month or something like that. Because I can tell by the hat. I would never wear an ugly hat like that. I've got much better hats.
I love how y'all can tell based on what you're wearing or the look of somebody. You can pinpoint exactly.
My memory is like a steel trap. Even though I'm 78 years old, I used to, like when I wrote that book, how did you know that detail? Did you have to look it up? No. I'd close my eyes and I could see the name tag on a guy. I mean, it just logged in, you know, it's just right there.
And I hate it's taken me so long to get these, but I mean, these have quickly, along with the Six Silent Men series with Mr. Ken, Mr. Gary, Mr. Ray, but Mr. Larry's books are just outstanding. And now to know that he's going to be doing another one based on his visits are going to be.
Oh, you want to hear the name of this other one?
Oh, yes, please.
I went back to prove that America was right about going to the Vietnam War. I really thought for all these years I defended it and defend blah, 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 blah. And I was in Thailand and I got in an argument with this woman that, and I didn't really get an argument. She was doing a yoga class and she joined the class and we're out at having tea afterwards. And she was a professor, she was from Canada and she'd just been in Hanoi. And she was telling me, well, have you heard that the original way they said that the war started, which was the boats that were fired. She said it didn't happen that way. And I used to defend him. Oh, normally I would have said, oh, you're full of bullshit. But I just listened. And she goes, you don't believe me? It's an hour flight. Go there and find out for yourself. So I said, I will, So I flew to Hanoi. I always thought, man, I'm going to Hanoi unarmed. I didn't know where I was going to stay. I didn't know nothing. But it was, I remember the drive in the cab to Hanoi, and I kept looking out the window thinking like, oh, nobody recognizes me, like somebody from the war. But I get there and there's like this Hanoi Hilton, which is not the Hilton that you think about, but really brand new. There was a Sheraton. I stayed at the Sheraton for a few nights. It was expensive, but that night there was an HBO special, and it was our good friend McNamara, the asshole that he was, finally does a thing called the fog of war. And he admits how this didn't happen, it was a mistake. We should, and I was listening to it and I was so freaking mad. I took the clicker thing for the television and I threw it at the television, broke it. And I was so pissed off. How could all these years I'd been defending this stuff? And that's what made me start to really do this investigation about Ho Chi Minh. And so, I went to the archives and I found these pictures like the ones you saw. And then I found a little thing, which you're probably one of the first to even know this, but there was a little picture of the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence. And I've got a picture of the original one. Ho Chi Minh this guy had a great memory too. He copied our original. Most people don't know the Declaration of Independence from a cat's first name, but it starts. It's about. I think it's all men are created equal or something like that. But it's
the preamble, yes, sir.
It's about our breaking free of our colonial guy, which was King George. So Ho Chi Minh just scrubbed out King George and put in the French, and it's right there. And I'm looking at this thing going, oh my God, he had copied everything, and he had told all these OSS guys, and these were like CIA, the precursor of CIA. So then these guys were talking about hardcore. The Deer Team jumped in, behind or anyway.
Jedburgh guys, hardcore. And these guys, the reason why they wanted Ho Chi Minh to, he had, God, there's so much. I'll try to make it short, but most people don't know this, but 300 Americans got killed flying over Vietnam. Most people don't realize. And a lot of them were shot down by the Vichy French. And the French shot them down, they would turn them over to the Japs, and the Japs would torture them and kill them or whatever. And so they were not our friends. You'll see I have a little hostility about the French. But the Ho Chi Minh the Viet Minh had rescued an American pilot, and Ho Chi Minh walked him all the way to China, to Kinnan, China, where the headquarters, Chiang Kai-shek's army.
Well, he's not there, but the place where the OSS was launching out of, where the guys that were flying with the Tigers, the flying
Tigers, yeah.
And the guy that was the general there, they said, well, for rescuing him, can we pay you? What do you want for doing that? He said, I just want an autographed picture of him. So he wanted an autographed picture of this famous general. And anyway, they recruited him to become a spy, to go behind lines, the Japanese lines. They were blowing up. People don't realize this. Most American historians, or they think they're historians, only know about Pearl Harbor, December 7th. December 8th, December 7th, we lost 2,370, whatever the number was in the ships. December 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, the Japanese, there was 300,000 people who were killed. They took over all of Southeast Asia. And you know where they launched out of? Vietnam. But it wasn't called Vietnam back then. It was called Indochina. So people don't relate to Indochina as Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. Well, the Japs had, their Navy and their Air Force were in these, on the
coast of Vietnam.
In Vietnam. Well, you know who was guarding all that stuff? The French. Because when Hitler, when the French recapitulated in 6 days or whatever it was, and it became the Vichy French. So all of those territories that used to belong to France now were part of the Axis powers, and so they were basically hooked up with Japan. So the Japanese said, "Look, you guys can keep your jobs," and that allowed them to free up troops to go kill Americans. So the Vichy French are really directly killing Americans. And no one ever talks about that part of it because, we love the fucking French. They're so fucking wonderful. We've got to, so that was used against us with Ho Chi Minh, because they convinced Truman that
French colonialism is a good thing for us.
Well, it convinced them to give them that it was okay for them to reinvade Vietnam and take it back as one of their colonial things. Well, the very ships, the Liberty ships that we gave to the British gave to the French, and all of our uniforms they gave, tanks and stuff. The Liberty ships that first landed in Haiphong Harbor to reinvade Vietnam with the French had the same tanks that liberated the French in Paris. They just fucking betrayed the whole thing. And so I can imagine Ho Chi Minh thought we were allies. Now I got to bring in another one of my favorite guys, Richard fucking Nixon.
Oh, Lord.
People don't realize all those nicknames that he got started way back. He went in World War II and served.
Card thief.
But then after that, he was a young congressman from California, and he was an attorney, right? Well, guess who he was an attorney for? McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
McCarthy, the
Communist Red Scare.
So all of that he was a part of. So the way the story goes, the war, Roosevelt dies, Truman takes over, the war ends the war. Now, Truman could care less about Vietnam or Indochina. It's not even on his radar. But Richard Nixon had a little conversation with him and says that if he supports Ho Chi Minh, then he's a communist. And so, of course, they said, well, then it must be the French. So they turned our backs on the one guy that was our ally through the whole fucking World War II and set up the Vietnam War. That's what my book's about. The title of my book is Uncovering Vietnam's Forgotten Role During World War II, A Personal Journey into America's Hidden Wartime Past. And I've documented all this stuff. I've got pictures of all this stuff. And it's criminal what these guys that were our leaders did to us. Now, in defense of all of us guys that were fighting in Vietnam, that was like heads up. They were, we were fighting communism, but not the way that we never would have had to. It would have never come to any of that if they would have done what the OSS guys. There are all these letters that Ho Chi Minh had written to Truman. He said he never read them. They were classified. Those were the things that came out in what was called the Pentagon Papers.
Oh,
revealed. So all this stuff comes out, and of course, Americans, if we had been so brainwashed that well, you must be a spy, and so they were going to. Nixon was the president when the Pentagon Papers came out, and he was going to crucify Daniel Ellsberg. Well, Daniel Ellsberg was was also had been, I think he was a Marine.
He was.
And he had been in Vietnam with another guy who was a friend of mine. I was the best man at his son's wedding, was John Paul Vann. I know this is weird, the way this all gets connected. After I got out of graduated from college, I got a job at E.F. Hutton, and I didn't really good as a stockbroker. And one of the guys I met was a guy by the name of John Vann. And he asked me to go be at his wedding. So I flew to Colorado. I'm in his house, and I look up on the wall, and I see this plaque, these row of medals. I thought it was for a platoon of guys. For World War II, he was been a ranger, and he was a flight wing. He was all of these things. John Paul Vann got kicked out of the Army. He was the young lieutenant colonel that in 1964 had told the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the war is unwinnable. And so for his reward for warning us, they kicked him out. Well, Abe, because he had friends he wanted to get back into the action, Abe hired him to go back into Vietnam, and he ended up being the equivalent of a 2-star general over I guess it was 3 Corps. Contiem, is that 3 Corps? Anyway, over
yes, sir.
And there's John Paul Vann. So he don't put that picture up because it'll break my concentration. I guess you can put that away. So he was going to testify in Daniel Ellsberg's trial on behalf of Daniel Ellsberg, and then he got killed. His helicopter supposedly crashed, but it could have been blown up, or who knows what. If somebody wanted to get rid of you, it'd be easy to do because there's a bunch of controversy about that. But he had received the second highest medal, which is the
DSC.
DSC, and on it says Mr. John Paul Vann. Well, if you look up a DSC, you can't give it to a civilian. So I mean, he was, when he died, he had 2 stars on his jungle things, but the Army never recognized him because he wasn't in the regular Army, because he was attached to it and working for aid. And I took this clear to the Joint about 10 years ago to the guy that was the head of the Joint Chiefs, and I said, look, I might have been I was a ground pounder. I don't know too much, but I do know if it walks like a duck and it quacks, it's a freaking duck. And I sent him all this stuff I had. So they gave me a guy to investigate why. Here's the kicker, you won't believe. John Paul Vann's name is not even on the wall. Not even on the wall. He spent 10 years in Vietnam, died in Vietnam in an Army helicopter that was his helicopter. He was running 3 Corps. He was known as the B-52 guy. He got a DSC, the Battle of Con Tien, rescued probably 300 guys.
Con Tum. It was Battle of Con Tum. He saved
everybody. And if you go, and you can do this, you go in and you can now listen to Nixon's tapes. And if you go to right around the Watergate time, his son, my friend, John Vann, and his mother and his 2 brothers went to the White House to receive, that was the funeral for his dad. And all these generals really admired him, and everybody, thought he was great, except for one guy, Nixon, because he was going to testify against him. And if you listen to the tapes, you'll hear Nixon, the guy, anyway, Nixon telling Haldeman or whoever was in there with him, boy, those guys really got a lesson today, because he said, look, I really should have given he kept the press out when he did this, but you can hear it on the tapes. Your father really deserved the Congressional Medal of Honor, but I can't give it to him because he was a civilian, blah, 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 blah. And so I used that to try to get the Army to give him what he really deserved, which is a Congressional Medal of Honor. But when the whole thing, they made me try to prove some connection to the Army. And the only thing, the letter that Abrams had written him, which first of all, I said, look, common sense. Why would a guy risk his life and do all of that stuff? What, just for some money? Because he had been a lieutenant colonel, he could end up becoming a general. And he was promised to be a 2-star general when the war was over, but he died. And this letter between him and Abrams, I even called his sons. Abrams' 3 sons are all generals too. I called one of them to try to remember this stuff, because what people don't realize was General Abrams in World War II was a colonel, but they give you, they advance you to, but they can't give you, there's a term I'm trying to think of, even Eisenhower, really a 4-star general. He was there, but they have to wait until you come back and he gets voted in Congress.
Supreme Allied Commander, or
yeah, or whatever. But there's a term for it, and I can't remember. I'll think of it later. But that's what Vann was going to do. He had everything set up to be that. But Nixon hated him because he was going to testify against Daniel Ellsberg. Anyway,
I mean, he was Cords, he was USAID, and then was MACV there toward. I mean, this guy. There's a book somebody just wrote.
He was one of the last guys. I mean, he was one of the last guys that died in the Vietnam War, and he's not on the wall.
That's an embarrassment to the country.
Embarrassment, and I've called the people at the wall, and it all came down to me trying to find something, and it stopped. They stopped because I couldn't find any connection to the U.S. Army, any connection like a pay stub. Well, he was paid from aid, but aid would take officers from the Marine Corps, from the Air Force, and they would use them, put them in positions, because nobody wanted to be in Vietnam in 1974. If you were smart, you knew the game was up. It was over, and they were leaving. Well, he stayed to do this. It's just tragic. And matter of fact, I just had a conversation with John Vann, the son, about 3 weeks ago, and we're going to go to Vietnam, and we're going to go try to find where his dad. I know where we can locate where his dad's helicopter crashed, and if we can prove that the helicopter has there's like an explosion, the metal would be blown out. If that's the case, then it would be murder, and murder could be reinvestigated, because murder there doesn't have
no statute of limitation.
So that's one of my goals. I even found a woman who was an expert in forensic stuff in Cambodia. I mean, I've been into this stuff. I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life to finding out everything I can about how we got fucked.
When this book comes out, not to disrail, you're going to have to come on and do a whole, and listen to this. Pat Watkins, the SOG warrior, was supposed to be on the helicopter with JPV.
Wow.
How about that?
All this stuff is so connected, you won't believe it. And if you go back there, you find out all of the other side of this story. The other side is still there. Like
Pat can tell you where it's shot down at.
Yeah, that's great. Okay,
I'll get you in touch with Pat Watkins.
Mark that down. What was I going to say? About the book. I've actually written the book, but my good friend Ed Mann is coaching me to go back and make it better, because I've tried to. Most of my contacts in the publishing industry, because that Recondo and that came out 30 years ago, so you got a whole new group of people. Well, guess who those people are that are running the publishing? Farmers. And farmers don't like anything about. When I say farmers, not farmers like out farming. That's not what I mean. I mean, these people are highly educated, Harvard graduates, writers and stuff. And so anything that, I come with a book about Vietnam, they're not interested. So I've got to really make this book. So what I've done is made it be my journey to find all these things. So it's kind of like, Eat, Pray, Love, except with guns. I thought that was kind of funny, but that would be.
I mean, you've completely blown my mind here with the John Paul Vann connections here. I mean, I actually, for that matter, now that I just thought about Khartoum and during the Easter offensive and such, I think I know a SOG man that was still in country working with the STD T-158 team that I can also get you in touch with. This is crazy.
The stuff that I wrote up a whole on my little investigation. I wrote everything up on how the Army was going to do it, how he was going to get the stars, the regulations and everything, but the piece of paper, the agreement between him and Abrams was somehow lost or missing. And oh, by the way, John Paul Vann's records were in the depository. There was a big fire in 1959 and his stuff was all burnt down. And I said, can't you guys hey, play with me for a second. You have, if you're going to do a murder investigation, you have what's called, the direct evidence, and then what's the other kind of evidence?
Circumstantial.
Evidence. All of this is circumstantial. It leads up to a conviction that this guy was going to be a general. You should take him. You should be glad to take him in as a as one of your warriors, not discard him
and then potentially kill him. Allegedly, I'll say allegedly, so we don't get in trouble here.
Could have easily. I mean, here's another thing. When I'll have you talk to John if you want to, because he can tell you some cool stories about his dad.
Oh yeah,
he really hated because that was another different story. But when they went back, him and his mom were staying for the funeral. Guess where they stayed? At the Watergate. Guess what happened during the days of the funeral?
The
Watergate break-in. Guess what he said his mom told him when they were in the hotel room? It sounds like somebody tapped our phone. Sounds like somebody's on the phone, on the phone in the room. I mean, this stuff is so amazingly connected that I can't believe some like James Patterson hasn't written it.
Investigative journalists hadn't happened upon this. I mean,
there's a lot of. They've done it from the Watergate break-ins. The stories that they made the movie out of. But this is like the other side of Nixon. That everybody knows he lied to us. I've got a photograph, and of course I was gonna try to find it before we came on, but we would hear about how much Cambodia was bombed. You always heard, well, they bombed Cambodia today. Well, while I was there, I found a photograph that came from this. There's a group back in Yale University. This one guy had taken all of the Air Force keeps great records. So all of the bombing records, every time a bomb was dropped on anywhere, they've got it's on computer, even back then. So he made a map of every bomb that hit in Cambodia. So here's if this is Cambodia, the whole thing is covered in red. And we were told they were just bombing to protect us on this. No, they bombed clear back to Angkor, where Angkor Wat was. They bombed the whole place, because what had happened was the Air Force there was something like 8,400 sorties over Cambodia, and 6,300 of them didn't have a designated target. So they in other words, you got a B-52 full of bombs and you want to go back to Thailand, you can just drop them on Cambodia, fuck it, out of your way. Well, all of those bombs that blew up, a lot of them killed, they figured they killed about 300,000 civilians. So all those young people watching their granddad's farm get blown up and everything, guess who they joined immediately? The Khmer Rouge. So Pol Pot, and you can look at the dates on this. The Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge before Vietnam, he had about 1,500 guys. After the war was over, after the bombing, it was like 15,000. His army had grown. So when Long, who was the prime minister of Cambodia, he skipped town. Of course, we paid for his way out, and he left with $300,000. Bought a house in Hawaii, and then one in Long Beach, and brought his mistress and his wife and a bunch of money, and left the country. Screw it. Pol Pot, that opened up an empty space, and Pol Pot came in and immediately started killing anybody that had anything to do with America or the government. They used the bombing to evacuate Phnom Penh. They said, look, America's going to bomb Phnom. You get everybody come out. They made everybody go, and they took people that were city people. They made them go live in the country. Pol Pot was insane. He wanted to bring Cambodia back to year zero. He was disciple of Mao. Remember that Mao had done the
Great Leap Forward, or
no, the revolution, I was going to say the
Cultural Revolution.
Cultural Revolution. So one of the guys that was there studying under him was Pol Pot. He was really a smart guy, and Mao had really thought this guy is cool because he was taking the country back to year zero. That was the plan, and money was outlawed. If you wore glasses, you could be executed. If you had a picture of your family. Now, how I know all this is true is I've lived in Cambodia for 10 years. I have adopted a family. I met a woman there that I told her, look, and she had been when she was a little girl, she only has a 3rd grade education, but that's because when she was a young baby, her parents would put her close to where they live. And they had to live in a camp. They put her in an irrigation ditch, and she had to stay there and be quiet all day long, even if it was raining. She had to stay there until it was night. Then they would go get her, bring her back in, because if Khmer Rouge found out they were taking care, they had a family, then they would separate them, and she would go to a camp. So I said, look, here's the deal. In Cambodia, it's still very much a man's world, and not that that's bad, but if you're a woman, it's bad. There's no such thing as spousal support. You want to get divorced, you just leave. And she had to buy her kids. She said 4 young girls. She had to buy them from his mother. And, she's basically was living on the street. And I said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take care of you, so you don't have to worry about working or making, bed, fixing, cleaning or whatever it is. And by the way, 3rd grade education, the prime minister of Cambodia only had a 3rd grade education, and anyway, so what has happened, 10 years has gone by, and I paid for the rent, for the food, for the clothes, for the school, everything, education for English language. The oldest daughter is in her last year of law school in Phnom Penh at the Cambodian Royal University of Law and accounting and economics, I guess it is. And the other 3 girls are in the same school. They just started. So I got 3 girls going to a university that would have been just, making beds or marrying at 15, like so many girls have to do. I mean, we screwed Cambodia so bad, and nobody ever acknowledges. No president of the United States has ever said, hey, we're really sorry about what we did to you, because they don't see the connection. They can't make the connection that our bombing opened up the communists to come. The real people we should have been fighting was Khmer Rouge, was those communists. I mean, they were the bad ones. I mean, I get too pissed off when I think about all of this stuff.
Yeah,
but
I mean, terrible.
That's people. The stuff that keeps me going is I take care. I want to be a hero. Guess what? I'm a hero of 5 girls. And so Pete, the mom, and I take care of the father, the mother, sometimes the sister, the other brother, and the other brother and his baby. I don't care. I just got them into a big house recently, and they all come and stay there. It's just, and you'll see paintings that I do of Cambodian girls, and it's usually them. I'll paint pictures of them. They're beautiful people. They're amazing people. They're kind people. They're forgiving people, but it's just, and there's one thing that we all have in common when you live in Phnom Penh. Everybody hates the Russians. And the Chinese are right now trying to take over. We say there's 2 kinds of Chinese. There's the good Chinese and the bad Chinese. The good Chinese are like the Taiwanese. We love the Taiwanese. That's who Ken Miller is married to. Ken Miller graduated from University of Taiwan. The Chinese that are coming out of China, they're coming to Phnom Penh to turn it into another Hong Kong, not Hong Kong, but another
vassal state,
casino. And they speculate and they treat people like shit. I mean, it's amazing. And I love to intimidate them because I don't give a shit. I mean, I shouldn't say all this, but just before I left, this one Chinese guy, and I knew where he was from, and he was in our restaurant where I know all of the waitresses, they're all my friends, and he was going, he's talking like that. I got so fucking pissed off. I went over and I said, listen, you fat fuck, you talk to these people like that and I will kick your fucking ass. And his son gets up and I will start with this little young punk son of a, and it scared the shit out of me, because when I get really pissed off, I'm not going to back up, and they left, and everybody in the restaurant was like frozen. Nobody was talking.
My straight ahead, not looking side to side at all. Like, oh shit.
I hate bullies. I hate that whole thing. Anyway, that's why I live there. I mean, I've got an address there and here. I mean, I live in Lake Arrowhead. Lake Shasta. God, my mom is gone. I live at Lake Shasta, and it's wonderful up here, and it's really great. but it's small town, and you know, I'm doing bigger things in that country that, you know, I've given paintings to the guy. One of my friends is the guy at the people don't know this, but they're still looking, you know, for the 1,200 missing soldiers in Vietnam. Well, that office is in Phnom Penh at the embassy. So I got to know the young, I guess he's a captain. Yeah, he's a captain that's in charge of that. And I said, look, because I painted some pictures of the Vietnamese, and I said, give these as a, you know, as a token to try to help find missing. And like I found so far 250 graves in Phnom Penh. And how I found them was, first I went back to Hanoi and I made friends with this woman who was in charge of the, it's called Martyr is the name of it. And they're for the families. Like people don't realize, but if you go to Vietnam on any holiday, any weekend, you'll find all these families in the graveyards. They're still looking for their sons. We have 1,200 guys missing. They have 400,000 unaccounted for soldiers. And here's what it says on their death certificate, where it says location, south. That's all it says. So I figured out a way to find their bodies. Like I'd look at, this would be expensive to do, but all of our after action reports have names, locations, and numbers of where the dead are. I mean, how many were killed. And usually they were buried there where they, you know, so I could locate them. And so I started telling the story in Phnom Penh, and this one woman who was a waitress at this place, well, I know where there's some Vietnamese. And she took me out to this place where, because, you know, Vietnam invaded, when they came to rescue Cambodia, 70,000 were killed. So I found this place in the backwaters of Phnom Penh where all these graves are. And all these poor people are living there. I did a whole video. It's on my video stuff of that. But so I wrote down, took pictures of all of that, and I sent it to the woman up in Hanoi. So I'm still actively doing that stuff. You know, gives my life meaning. It's like, to me, the war is still going on. I mean, at least the after effects. You know, and it'll be the same way for the guys that fought in, you know,
Afghanistan and Iraq.
They're gonna when they get my age, they're gonna want to know, why did they get screwed over? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And when they find out, they're gonna be pissed off. And being pissed off is a good thing if you channel it into energy. You know, keeps me alive, keeps me doing push-ups every day.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of them are actually beginning to see a little earlier than you guys. I think that there's a wide group that are starting to be more vocal.
We're great at going into wars. We don't have an exit strategy. We never have an exit strategy, you know, but it's easy to get into them, you know, vote, get Congress, boom, you're there. But getting out is a little tougher. Or what happened? So I called this thing the Missing History Project that I financed it myself, but my goal is the economic and the humanity, what happened to the people after we leave a war? What happens to all those people? You know, I mean, they're worried about guys that were interpreters and they're getting, you know, well, that's kind of like what I'm doing, except in Vietnam, you know, all the stuff in Cambodia, all the stuff that happened to these people later. And when I tell a Cambodian, when I say, look, I apologize for what we did to your country, you know what they say? They don't go, well, I never heard. They go, thank you, because they know it. They already know the story, you know? It's just, it's amazing how small-minded we are. You know, we're on this island called the United States. It's really an island. And the rest of the world is going on, you know, 8,000 miles away down below, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfectly put. We're on our own secluded little area here. We've got a few questions, and we will
a little over.
Yeah. Like over our hour and a half markage, but it's been perfect. I mean, everyone is glued in, and it's perfect. But we've got some good questions here to close out. I hope some of our guys are still with us. If not, they'll watch later. But Jed was curious. This is going to be a good one. Nope, that wasn't a question. Here it is. Were you ever able to locate the man on the cover of your first book?
No, I have no idea. Somebody told me who that was, but I remember when I went back to a reunion and somebody said, "That's not the guy. That's not Larry Chambers," because he knew that guy. This guy's name was Lurch. No, the first book had a picture. There was a first cover that came out, had somebody else's picture. That's the second edition of it. And I said, "Look, why don't you put my picture on?" It said some guy I don't know.
It's my story after all.
Yeah.
No, we just did that one. Where did I mess that one up?
This
there
guy
we go.
had one of the original books. Good for you.
Yeah, Jed is a big reader. A lot of originals.
Talk about those guys. Looney's one of my favorites, especially the killer worm story. Oh yeah, when we thought there was these worms that were going to attack. So one of the things that people don't read, that was my team, basically right there. Those guys. Sometimes they were different, but Looney was always with us. Usually, he was the radio man, most mild man. He works for the VA right now. I talked to him not too long ago. He's still working for the VA, helping veterans. Guy's an amazing guy. So we were on this one mission, and he was convinced that there was these gigantic worms that were, because everything seemed to be bigger there. I mean, I found out from living over there, like how big anaconda snakes are, like 30-foot long and like that round. Maybe that's what he saw. But we had so many different things that would happen, but I don't know the whole story about the killer worm story, but it's just something that he was crawling on him that he thought were killer worms. I don't know.
I think, did y'all call John Burford Honest John?
Yeah, Honest John.
Would that be Honest John right here?
Yep. Yeah, the guy on the right, and the guy on the left, on my left it is, that's the first guy you said the guy that recruited me. Byron. That's Byron. That was my first team leader.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's a great photo.
I don't even have that. I want to get that photo.
I've got three that somebody just happened to post on Instagram this morning, and
wow. I got to get on some of these things. I'm not on Instagram. There's Burford. I took that picture, by the way, and that talk about a heavy trail. Look, get rid of that thing down the writing below. And look how big the trail is. It was, well, you can't see it, but it's right at the crossroads of this trail. And he found some letter or something that some guy wrote. But, he is breaking rules. He's got his cigarette in his mouth, but Burford didn't give a shit. He smoked a cigarette, undercover. You're not supposed to really smoke in the field, but, But anyway.
Look at that terrain back. I mean, y'all were just beating bushes. God.
Shortly after that, we ran into some VC.
Oh,
I don't like to use the word gook, and you'll see it in my book, and I wish I could have taken that. Well, that's the word we use.
Word of the times, yeah.
We also use the word fuck a lot, which was hard to break, and I never cussed till I went there. But I remember I got to interview General William Westmoreland, and I interviewed him because I wanted him to write something on my book. I thought he owed me, and I actually called him at his own house. Information again. I found his name. It was in North Carolina, wherever the hell it was. And I got him to talk on the phone, and I said, could I, after I interviewed him for one of Linder's magazines, I said, can I send you my book and maybe you could write something? So I sent him the thing, and he sent me back a letter with his picture. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't endorse your book because of the language that you guys use.
Oh,
holy mackerel, is this guy disconnected from us or what?
Jeez, boy, that's
Anyway, he's dead. Sorry,
Westmoreland. Yeah. Your unit was able to develop and cultivate relationships with the pilots from the Kingsmen. Could you speak a little bit about Chief Warrant Officer Dave Poley? By all accounts, he was a good man and terrific pilot.
Yeah, well, you just said it right there. Poley was our guy. Poley would go in the air. There's Poley something. I can't remember. The other guy was. I can see his picture. He wrote a book before he died. God damn it. All these guys had thousands of hours, and they would fly upside down, sideways to get guys out. But Mr. Poley was our guy. He would come and get us no matter what, day or night, in the middle of a firefight. He didn't give a shit. Wow. But yeah, they were the best. The 2nd of the 17th CAF, is where they were from.
Wow. The Kingsmen, if I'm not mistaken, a few of them actually saved Lynn Black up in at FOB1, if I'm remembering the correct, either the Minutemen or the Kingsmen. The group will help me out on that.
Well, this is probably a patch you've never seen.
Oh.
That's one Kingsman Cobra patches that I got from a Cobra pilot. I forgot who it was.
Wow. Never seen that.
And
several things on here we've never
probably
seen.
Never seen this either. That's
Ooh.
CCN. That's, you know,
RT Louisiana. Oh yeah.
And I've got also Kentucky, but you know where I got these? Cambodia. Vietnam. When you go to and this one I got from FOB1 when I go over and visit.
That's awesome.
But there's a shop. There's a bunch of shops. I keep wanting to say Saigon, but it's Ho Chi Minh City. And there's all these patches and all this stuff. You know, when we left uniforms and stuff. And so I try to find all of the, you know, the recon guys' stuff that, you know, just to kind of honor them and whatever.
I've got a few patches that my buddy has ordered from overseas, and I collect. I can't afford the originals by any shot, but I get some reproductions, and they're really cool. I like the patches.
An NVA cigarette lighter. Ching.
Whoa,
that's kind of cool. I think
I've never seen.
Still work. I could probably get it to work. If you put some fuel in, it'll still work.
Dang.
But small, sticks in a pocket. Boom. I mean, I get this stuff off of I don't want to see the bodies, but I would get this stuff however I got it. But I got the best thing to sleep on was this oilskin thing that would fold up to be about that big, but I could lay it out and sleep on it and, you know, keep you from the insects getting on you and stuff like that. But that got burnt up in the lightning strike because I had it over my head. And I can still remember like the disintegration of it going, you know, as I went up in the air. So that was the only casualty we had that day was my oilskin lining.
That's still, I thank God y'all are all okay behind that. That is, oh my gosh, Burford wrote a book too. Jed's curious, in your opinion, what made him a great team leader? He wrote a great book called LRRP Team Leader. Yeah,
I call that book The Story About Me because he's always Chambers did this, Chambers did that. It's, you know, he's not a writer, but he kind of wrote this like he was going to tell his nieces and nephews the story about it. So the way he wrote it isn't like putting you there like Linder does or Mann does or I do, where you take the person right into the story. He's trying to tell it almost like in third person, which causes distance. If you're a writer, you know what I mean? It makes you distant. So the book didn't do that good, even though I was in it a lot, which I thought would make it be a really great book. But, you know, these things happen.
I've found out here after buying so many books that people can get real persnickety on if it's not blood and guts. People seem to not like it. I don't understand that stuff.
I remember one time I asked my editor, was Owen Locke, how can I make this book? How could it have been a better book? He goes, you need to kill more people. I go, what?
Jeez.
No, that's what they wanted. That's what they wanted was more, firefights. I said, well, sorry about that.
I'll never. I mean, even people with LRRP and SOG books. I mean, y'all are literally in contact the moment the book starts till it ends, and it's like there needs to be more. Like,
almost every mission we went on, we'd get in contact, or we'd run into something because where we were going was where they were. Like they say, behind enemy lines. We were behind enemy lines, so you're gonna run into. Same with the SOG guys. They were going out further, and they would go into North Vietnam and Laos, but we were in coordination with them out of FOB1, so we're pulling their in-country mission, like Ashau Valley, stuff like that. What's really cool is you go to the Ashau Valley today, and I've got a video on my video thing on YouTube of me in the town of Alui, and right there I'm standing where the old Special Forces camp was. It's amazing. It's like history. And now people live there, and there's a town there. And, I've talked to guys and they'll say, well, the North Vietnamese are so terrible. They killed all the Montagnards after I left. No, they didn't. You're full of shit. I told that to my guide who happened to be a Montagnard. He goes, no, they built the highway for the Montagnards and they built the town. They didn't. There's so much misinformation about what the enemy did and all that stuff. I've got one video of a guy. I didn't know how long they kept him in prison or whatever, but what they would do, if you were an officer, you went, it wasn't really a prison like a prison. It was like an outdoor camp, but you couldn't do stuff. But this guy had lost his foot at one of these facilities, and he had carved a foot, because they don't have prostates. So he carved his own foot. And I go, I'm talking to him, and he had been an officer. He had been a lieutenant with us, with the 101st guys at Eagle. And at the end of the war, he goes in and he has to spend 3 years in this camp, and then he lost his foot. If you were like a captain or a major stuff, you'd go in for 10 or 20 years. But if you were just a grunt, guy in the ARVN thing, a lot of them, what they would do is you could never, drive your taxi in front of a government building. You couldn't stop in front of a government building. You couldn't be anything like that. But other than that, that was the penalty, So there were, and Ho Chi Minh has a lot to do with this, because he would tell his guys that, not to mutilate. And I know there was probably some guys that were, but I would hear these ridiculous stories that didn't happen that guys would make up in their minds. But we had guys that mutilated people. I mean, one of the things that's disgusting is if you go to Ho Chi Minh City, there's a 3-story building filled with pictures of all the atrocities that our guys did, because we were told that these people were nothing but venom, they were just, and so you have pictures of guys with ears and of course the famous
fingers,
the guys that killed everybody at
My Lai,
that's there, and all the the bombings that you don't think about it when you just hear, well, America bombed Hanoi tonight in a bomb. So I've got pictures of the after effects, and with the boards laid out with all the children that were died in that building and all their parents, and laying out on boards. It's just like, well, we did that. Hello, it's just, we don't realize. It's just like watching these guys blow these gunboats up. Hey, it's really simple. I can press a button. You're not there when you kill the guy face to face and you see their bodies, blown apart. That does something to you. I can play games on a computer screen all day long. That's dangerous. The drone shit and all that stuff, because it removes the human element where it's just a target. But you see real people. That's why I try to document all this stuff, because it's different. It affects you different. I close my eyes and see every person that I ambushed. I can see him in my mind.
Man, that and the drone is a huge issue nowadays. I hate those videos coming out of Ukraine, seeing that nasty stuff. Oh, yeah. Jed's curious about, and I had a question about the other CO after this, and I think this is one of the last ones.
Yeah,
Captain Eklund
would be in his loach, the little
sleeping.
He would be right off the ground. I mean, he would literally be hunting for trails, and he would take it down right. He had no fear at all. And then his replacement was Captain Cardona, and he was, a lot of guys didn't like him. I loved him. The guy was great. He even gave me a chance to get out of that when I was the belly man in the helicopter when Hamlin got killed. I was on the other helicopter. And I'd done like 3 rescue things in, and he said, look, you want out? I'll get somebody else. He goes, no, I'm fine. I really wanted out. But I said, no, I'll go, and that's when I got Miller and pulled him in. Miller, if you talk to him right now, he'll still rave about how I saved his life and all that stuff. Well, I had to, because I think he owed me some money. I don't remember. I had to save him all.
Ripped him and snatched him right up in there.
Almost threw him out the other side of the helicopter. Miller's not that big, but and when you got that adrenaline pumping, man, you can throw some weight. It's funny now.
What about Robert Guy? What did y'all think of Captain Guy?
He was okay. I didn't really, I mean, yeah, Cardona, he was after Guy. So Guy was Eklund's replacement. I mean, he was okay. I mean, he was just like a regular guy. He wasn't quite the same as Eklund, but he was a pretty good guy. There's the lieutenant. We got this one lieutenant in there that he won't even talk to anybody. Some of these guys are so pissed off once they found out about what was really going on. They won't have anything to do with us. They won't have anything to do with the military. They don't want to talk about it. They try to put it out of their minds. Well, it ain't going to get out of your mind,
Wow.
But he was a good guy. I mean, I thought he was. I mean, I didn't play cards with him, so I don't know. I was more with Burford and stuff. What other questions you got? We should end it.
Yep, but it's the last
3
one.
hours? Are you serious? I haven't even talked to my kids for 3 hours.
Did you ever get a wooden nickel to that pilot that rescued you?
Gave a wooden nickel? No, I don't even know what that means.
I'm not sure if that was a token. I've read from LePage's book that they had some wooden nickels that they would give pilots that they rescued. But
I've got coins. I've got a Special Forces coin somewhere. I've got
I've got those books' names.
5 cent. I can't find it. I don't know if I should. That's my NDA. Did I show you that? Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's the belt buckle. Yes. Holy cow. There's the star. That is, I mean, we don't get to see stuff like we've seen today very often, guys.
I'll tell you another thing that you won't know about. I mean, here's another belt buckle. That's just a DC belt buckle. Nickel. So I told you that Ho Chi Minh was on our side and all that, and the reason why we wanted him, the OSS wanted him, was a flank. If you look at a map, because we were going to invade Japan. So if you look at a map of Japan, on the far what's that, western flank is Vietnam, is Indochina, is Vietnam. So they were going to use the Viet Minh were going to be our flanking, side of the war, because they figured we were going to lose 1 million guys on that invasion, and we're waiting for Russia to get through. The Manchurian was going to come down, and then we were going to invade. And then, luckily for us, the Truman dropped the atomic bomb. Well, the Army always is prepared, so they made up 500,000 Purple Hearts, and one of my Purple Heart is from that. I've traced it back. If you got a Purple Heart, and you're from, I don't know if you got one in Afghanistan or Iraq, but they lasted all through Vietnam and, all through Korea and Vietnam. They were given out from the same batch that was going to be used
for the invasion.
Japan, because they figured we'd lose 500,000 guys right off the bat. So when you look on your Purple Heart, I don't have it in front of me, and you can see there's a number of it, and you can trace it back to the original
batch.
And so every guy that got one, I can promise you this is the truth, in Vietnam, that was from your father's war in World War II.
Holy cow.
It's connected. If you go back and you look at the history, it's so connected. It's just like this. We make it seem like it's like that, but it ain't.
That is unbelievable.
Every decision that was made back then has a consequences out in the future, and we're now in the future.
Definitely reverberated right now to us now.
And I really appreciate what you're doing. I mean, the fact that you're not getting paid to do this and all that stuff. And I mean, I do make 30 cents a copy if you buy my book, so I'm getting a lot of money on that. But I mean, you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart, or whatever your mission is. And I really, on behalf of other Lurps and Rangers and all that, thank you very much for what you're doing. I appreciate
it. Means a lot. You spending 3 hours sharing the history with us.
Well, remember I told you I got kicked out of English for talking? Now you know what.
Thank goodness, because we've absolutely enjoyed it. This has been spectacular. I can't thank you enough for this.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close down?
I'm hungry. I got to go eat some lunch.
I got to go walk the dog. So, guys, we are closing down.
Thank you guys for listening.